Welcome to iCatConnect, the virtual event for everyone working with or for unknown cats across the world. We're delighted that so many of you could join us, and we look forward to taking you on a journey, sharing challenges, ideas and solutions. Underpinned by our iCatCare philosophy about how we should care for cats, the sessions will take us all through an exploration of the species and how we can live alongside them in harmony to ensure their welfare. Our Head of Unknown Cats, Vicky Halls, will be introducing each short presentation and giving you time to reflect between each one. We all face many different challenges and issues in our work, and we hope that there'll be useful sessions for everyone. This event is about sharing, so please use the opportunity to connect with others, take ideas back to your colleagues, and think about the changes that you've always wanted to make. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank all our brilliant presenters for supporting the event, and also to thank all of you for taking time out from your busy days to be here, but more importantly, to say thank you for all the work you do every day for unknown cats across the world. The final thank you goes to Battersea for ensuring this event could happen through their Global Enabler Grant Programme. And now I'd like to hand over to Peter Lorry, the CEO at Battersea.
Battersea is very proud to be supporting the first iCatConnect event from International Cat Care through our Global Enabler Grant Programme. The unknown cat sector is facing unprecedented challenges globally, with the after effects of the COVID pandemic, the financial crisis affecting many parts of the world, the lack of veterinary capacity, and the ever-increasing numbers of cats in our homing centres, like here at Battersea, and on our streets. Tackling these issues is only possible if we collaborate with each other and work together to develop strategies and programmes that are both sustainable and effective. But if we can achieve this, we will see better cat welfare everywhere. I hope you enjoy this event and find practical and impactful insights that you can take away and share, or even apply to your work with unknown cats when the event is finished. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing from speakers from across the world share their reflections and experience. And to kick us off, I'd now like to introduce Vicky Halls from International Cat Care.
Thank you, Nicola and Peter. Our first presentation today is from Claire Bessant, who many of you will know is our former, now retired Chief Executive. Who better to start proceedings with an introduction to iCatCare's cat-friendly principles. Enjoy.
Welcome to what I hope are 2 days of learning, challenging, perhaps finding things that enlighten us, perhaps take away things that are going to make us do things differently. So I'm going to talk about cat-friendly principles for the next 15 minutes. And those who work with unknown cats, it's tough. Cats are complex, people are complex, the world is complex. I suspect the world of unknown cats is even more complex. Cats live in a world controlled by people, and we do have a moral responsibility to understand how our interactions with them affect them. We've got to strive for good welfare. So if we can simplify these complexities in some way by understanding and thinking clearly, that can only be a good thing. And that's how cat-friendly principles came into being. So International Cat Care has been going for over 65 years and began when cats really had no treatment for any physical problems they had, and the charity started to find out about diseases, about treatment, but then soon realised that actually we need to understand what cats are and that their mental well-being has a big effect on this. So they thought very long and hard about what are those things that help us make the decisions that we make. And so there are 3 principles that cover cats, and there are 4 principles about how we actually all interact with each other. So the very first one is respect cats, and this is the biggie. If you get this one right, you're well down the road to really following on into everything else. So respect the diversity of the species, understand what cats are in general, how they think, where they come from, and then also understand the individual cat, because as we all know, cats are very individual animals, and what one needs, another may not need. Sarah Ellis, who comes after me, is going to look at what a cat actually is, and we really need to think about that because that will shape how we go forward. Understand how what we do affects cats. Understand the different ways they live and the different ways they interact with people. So I'm going to cover it a little bit, but then leave the rest of it to Sarah. So iCatCare came up with this wonderful lifestyle spectrum, which really helps us to think clearly about the cats we're seeing, about cats we're seeing out on the street, right from the feral cat that has very little contact with people, up to the pet cat that sits on our lap and purrs. And we can't imagine really living that sort of life that a feral cat would, and everything else in between. But each of these cats has different needs, and how we help each of these cats is going to be different. So we really need to think about that, because trying to put a feral cat in a home and expecting it to be friendly and relaxed with people is not going to work. That's the extreme. But there are lots of subtleties in between, and if we understand them, we can help cats more. And then just think about how cats interact with us, and we're thinking about pet cats here. But of course, you do have many pet cats come through into homing centres, and what they think about the interactions we have with them, and by how they act, we can understand what is happening when we do things with them. We have the protective behaviours, cats that may be very fearful, want to run away, or may seem aggressive, but they're not. They're being defensive about many things, through to the tolerant cat, which I love. That's my favourite. I can just see that in some of my cats sometimes, which are needy at point as well. But I love it when they really don't want you to be doing something with them. So just think about how cats react and what you're doing and how that can help you understand what sort of cat they are. And then we think about empathy. We can be empathetic to people because supposedly we understand what they're feeling because we're all coming from the same place. But when you think about empathy for an animal, you need to understand, you need to perceive and care about the experiences that cat has from its perspective. And to respect it, you need to understand and have regard for how cats see and feel the world. Cats do live in the moment. They don't understand about suffering now to have a better day tomorrow. And that's hard enough when you're people, I think. So respecting a cat is not a person. It's thinking differently. It may be feeling very differently, can help us make a more accurate appraisal of its quality of life and how to help it. So what would the future look like? Well, we're talking unknown cats here, if we respected cats. Well, I suppose in a pet situation, we may have fewer abandoned cats if people understood cats better and what to expect and what not to expect, and to understand the kind of cat that they have. So I think that's very important, and that's sort of in the preventive area. We can think about lifestyle adaptations of those cats that are needing help and what we want to do for them. We can think about how we might help them without taking them into a homing centre. And those that we take into a homing centre, we hope are the ones that are going to be suitable to be homed as pets. And Vicky will talk later on about cat-friendly homing, and these are the very principles of cat-friendly homing. What do we do with those cats? How do we monitor them to make those decisions? Hopefully we understand cat welfare and make better decisions on that, and we match cats better to owners, homes, different environments, alternative outlets, whatever we want to do. And then we can try and put into effect humane population management, and a little bit more about that later. But that's so important, and it's got to be effective for us to continue to do it. Keep cats well. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But there's a little bit of complexity in there. Keep cats well sounds just as if it's about physical things, pain, discomfort, illness, disease. But in fact, to keep cats well, we need to very much consider their mental well-being as well. And there's a real vicious circle between those things, physical and mental, that can make things worse on both sides. So understanding that is another one of those vital things. Broome said, when we measure welfare, we need to have knowledge of the biology of the species. Again, know your cat, understand cats. because the methods used by animals to try and cope with difficulties can give us signs of how well they're doing. Are they coping well? Are they failing? Or are they being successful in how they're coping? Because for quality of life to be good, the individual must be able to control interactions with surroundings. Now, you might think, oh, it's in a homing centre, it's in a cage, it's not controlling much. But within that cage, we can control by giving it a box to hide in. We can think about how we handle, how we approach, the kind of timings we do for everything, just thinking about how cats think and what we could do to make things better. So what would the future look like? Well, hopefully we would be hot on disease control, because you don't want cats coming into a homing centre healthy and going out because they've caught something. That is absolutely vital. And that requires clear thinking, good protocols, and a lot of care, because many of these cats' diseases share between cats pretty easily. Good preventive healthcare, vaccination and all the rest of it, and maybe thinking about that for TNR as well when they're being neutered. And the big one again, early identification of discomfort or distress, thinking about that vicious circle on health. What can be done to make cats feel more comfortable and relaxed? And those will lead to protocols for housing, handling, and stress management. And of course, neutering. Neutering is number one for everything, just because they have so many cats that we can't help them all. Do cats no harm? Another one that sounds pretty obvious. This is the third one. Ensure cats are no worse off as a result of people or their activities. We might think, yes, we're not cruel, but maybe we're sometimes too kind. Are we feeding our animals too much? Are we making them obese, which is not good for them? That is causing harm. Are we handling them in the way that they're not enjoying, that they're uncomfortable with? Are we putting them into environments where they really are frightened and uncomfortable? We don't want to take a feral cat and put it into a human home, because that is not going to work. That cat is going to be fearful. So just think about the matching of those things. One of my pet things, which is probably not so much unowned cats, although I suspect you will see cats who've got problems because of the way they're bred. Let's think about what we're doing when we're breeding cats and don't cause harm. And then there's, of course, doing nothing, which actually can be harmful. So if you need to make a decision, don't put it off because it's difficult. We all tend to do that, but think about the welfare of the cat. And what could the future look like? Well, if we understand harm a little bit more in the wider context, that's going to help us think what we need to do. We can plan each cat's outcome based on the lifestyle that it had. We can try and make decisions in a timely fashion. We can try and avoid long-term confinement and distress. And again, neutering is going to prevent harm to future generations. Now we're on to the 4 cat-friendly principles, thinking about how we deal with people. And being solution-driven, I think, is really important, because there are resource problems in any unowned cat situation. You know, we don't have enough time, money, space, all of those things. So we have to be pragmatic. But if we understand the science, the information that we're given, we can make clearer decisions. We can be pragmatic, and we want those to be sustainable solutions. So again, reducing cat populations, TNR, it's not as simple as just going out and catching as many cats as possible and neutering. There needs to be a strategy. There needs to be thought about how each group is worked with. We need to think about the root causes. What can we do to prevent things rather than just mop up the symptoms the whole time? And I know that mopping up the symptoms takes so much time, you don't have time to think about the root causes, but perhaps we need to do that. Think about where you're going and why. Think about how to do it best. Individual care for cats, moving cats through quickly and successfully. What about if we communicated? Well, communication is the big one, isn't it? For everything, for everybody, for everything we do. And we must try and do it professionally, but also considerately. And the more we know, the better we can do that. And the more we think about the different people we're talking to, our different stakeholders, the better we will be at communicating in a style that suits them. You want to build good relationships with everyone, because it's always important. And usually in the end, it helps. Become a trusted expert. Maybe people come to you before problems become emergencies, or for ongoing help after cats are home so they don't come back. And this will enhance the reputation of those working in this very difficult field. You want people to look up to you and respect you and know that you know what you're talking about. And again, if you're talking about neutering and people are listening to you, perhaps that will happen more. What about collaborating? Again, thinking about collaborating with different people, with different organizations, learning from people around the world, getting insights, well, not just around the world, in our whatever country you're in. See what other people are doing, see what's working. Have common goals, key messages, because if people hear it from all different places, they're going to listen more. And if you're one organisation who only does homing or doesn't do TNR or find alternative outlets for cats, get together, combine those strengths. And just think about who you're working with. So if you're working internationally, think about the different needs and cultures in different countries, but also you can learn such a lot from them. And the last one is about evolving for cats, keeping learning. I've been working in this area for 35 years, and every day is a learning day. There's always something, some little thing that makes you go, oh, yeah, right, I get that. I know why that would work. I can see where I can use that, and it will help to optimize cat welfare. Don't cling to your old assumptions. Don't be defensive of them. Take them out, have a look at them, review the ways you work, and make changes if necessary. Think about cats first. It doesn't matter about your pride or any of that sort of thing. Think about it. Think what might work and try it, because success breeds confidence, enthusiasm, and innovation. And it helps people be supported and valued. Different people within an organization will know things that will help if you ask them. So, to summarize, know your cats. Know cats, know your individual cats. Look from a cat's perspective. Match the cat's needs to pragmatic solutions. Make confident and timely decisions. Think about prevention where possible. Always better than cure. Well, I don't think we even get to cure. We just get to manage. Measure, review, share what you learn, what works. Be excited about it. Be excited to learn, to be creative, to be empathetic to the cat, not just think about it from a human point of view. And be brave for the cats you're trying to help. I think that's important. Thank you.
It's rare in this business to just take time out to think. So we're giving you the opportunity throughout this event to take time for yourself for a change. After every presentation, you will have a precious single minute to reflect on what you've heard. It's only a minute, so use this time however it suits. But whatever you do, enjoy the luxury. So have you ever asked yourself, what are my values? Have you ever been presented with a problem that confuses you? What do I do now? For me, this is where a set of principles that underpins everything can make a difference. Claire has given us a glimpse into a possible cat-friendly future where, for example, all cats in care that are stressed or uncomfortable are identified quickly and supported to feel better, and infectious disease outbreaks are rare. Let's take that moment to reflect. Do you think you could adopt these as your very own cat-friendly principles? Which one resonates with you the most? Respect cats or collaborate for cats maybe? Why don't you take a short time to think, or maybe make some notes about what resonated with you? Let's pause for a minute. Welcome back. I hope that was useful. So this is the beginning of our journey. Now we have the cat-friendly principles. What else could inform our thinking and our behaviour? Let's turn to the star of the show, the cat. We can't do anything to support the species if we don't take the time to get to know them. And that's impossible to do by just being with them, as cats hide so much from us. Let's put them front and centre now and listen to Sarah Ellis as she asks the question, what is a cat and why does it matter?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Ellis and I'm Head of Cat Mental Wellbeing and Behaviour at International Cat Care. All of you love cats, I have no doubt about that. Why else would you be here? I really love them too. But is loving them enough? If we apply those cat-friendly principles, we realise we need to find out as much as possible so we know what cats need. Sometimes it isn't what we think. For example, is it always in a home as a pet cat? Or is it more complicated than that? This presentation asks that question. What is a cat and why does it matter? There are lots of features that make cats unique and often challenging, make them the species that they are. And I appreciate that you might not always get an opportunity in your day-to-day work to really think about that, because I recognise how busy you are caring for the many, many cats that you do. But I hope we can take this opportunity now together to do a bit of a dive into some of these features. So let's start with the fact that the cat's a predator. I'm sure you know that. Those free-roaming cats that hunt for their survival will eat between 10 and 20 small prey per day. It's suggested that approximately a quarter to a half of these hunts are unsuccessful. So hunting in general, searching for food, takes up so much time of their day and energy expenditure. They're busy out there looking for food. And while doing that, it's really important that they use avoidance and evasion, that they maintain quiet and not be noticed. Because in many countries, for example, the United States of America, where there are coyotes, they are a prey species as well as a predator. And just because in some countries there aren't those predators, doesn't mean that the cat no longer perceives itself as a prey and that there may be, in its mind, potential predators out there. It remains a prey species as well as a predator. And that's something we really have to consider and helps us understand sometimes why cats are so elusive and are so genuinely worried or cautious of new things. Injury is therefore very costly. One, because they're a prey species, so they can be predated on. And two, because they're a solitary hunter. Nobody helps them find their food. So if they're injured, they're not going to be able to access any food. They deal with their stress in many ways. They have a number of behavioural strategies, and I'm going to focus on the most common three. Out of those, the one they use the most is avoidance or flight. When a cat is faced with something that it perceives as potentially dangerous or really dangerous, it will move away from it, and it will often do so at speed. It will create a distance between itself and the thing that's causing it some concern. And very often, that flight will result in ending up high because the cat wants to flee to a safe place. And cats feel that being up high makes them feel safer. So very often, it will be to a place of safety, up a tree, on top of a wardrobe, and if getting up high is not available, then it will certainly be behind an object of some sort where it feels it's hidden. If that's not possible to the cat, the flight option isn't there. So for example, when it's confined, it may fight. It may use its repulsion strategy. And that's where it thinks, right, I can't get away from this thing. I'm going to have to try and make this thing move away from me. So it will hiss, it will spit, it will growl, it will swat, it might even bite. The important thing to remember is it's not a cat that's mean, bad, evil, none of those things. It's a cat that's scared, that's desperately trying to make this thing that it's scared of go away. And if it could get away from it, it would much prefer to do that, but that option's not there for it. And then we have other cats that maybe choose not to repulse, to use a repulsion, but to inhibit their behavior instead. They freeze. They go very, very still. They sort of completely disengage from what's going on around them. They may keep a watchful eye, but they won't move at all. They almost think, if I pretend I'm not here, then that thing might actually go away. And these cats can often be quite easy to handle and interact with because they're not repulsive in terms of using that repulsion behaviors. So the threat of injury is much less, but it doesn't mean it's right to handle them. In fact, handling them can make them much, much, much more scared and more likely to switch over into that repulsion strategy. So really important, if we've got those inhibited cats, we really respect their emotional state and we try and alleviate that rather than bash on and get done what we need to do. Cats are creatures of habits. Boy, do we know it. They love a routine. They love a predictable routine. They want to be fed at the same times, particularly, when they're in shelters or homing centres. That routine really gives them a sense of control, of safety, of security. No. They are creatures who love familiarity. They thrive on it. They like a familiar place to live, a territory, somewhere where it contains their key resources in a safe place, somewhere they can rest and sleep without worrying, somewhere where they can eat and drink without feeling too vulnerable. It's no wonder that cats actively defend this place. They want to keep it their safe haven. It's absolutely key to their survival. Some might say they are the ultimate control freaks, but that has led them to being such a successful species. They are sensory beings. Now, while I'm chatting to you, and the biggest part of my communication is my voice, for cats, their biggest part of their communication is actually something that we don't use as humans that much. It's chemical communication. Cats deposit chemicals in their environment through scent marking, by facial rubbing, by scratching, by urine spraying, and by middening. That is the depositing of feces and not burrowing it. By doing that, they're able to communicate with other individuals at a distance without actually having to physically meet. They'll communicate information such as, are they friends? Are they foes? Whose land or territory is this? How long ago was somebody in it? If they're sexually intact, are they reproductively ready? So much information. They'll use those chemicals in groups for social cohesion. That is, if they're the type of cat that can suit being in the group. Not all can, as we'll see. Moving on to their vision, it's specialised for low light and movement, absolutely essential for their predatory behaviour and catching their prey, who often are most active in low light conditions and who move in straight, fast lines. Their hearing also is really specialised for helping them hunt and catch food. Really good at hearing high frequency sounds, the sounds that their prey make, and they have these amazing mobile ears that can detect sound from all directions. Their whiskers and paws are really sensitive to touch. It allows them even to detect vibrations, which really help them navigate through their environment. And as a species, the cat is adaptable to many lifestyles. For example, living alone as a feral cat, adapted to free roaming, avoiding people at all costs, and hunting for its food. Then we have those cats that are street cats. They're also adapted to free roaming, but they do live in inhabited areas, often scavenging for food. Then we have those cats we could class as in-betweener cats. Now, these are tricky ones because they're not adapted to free roaming or to life in a domestic home. They're a bit of a conundrum. They're best suited to an alternative lifestyle, such as, for example, a farm or stables, where the cat has a very hands-off kind of care. But there is care because a caregiver will always provide food. Finally, there's a pet cat, adapted to living happily in a domestic home. So while we have many cats sitting on the spectrum of lifestyles, it's important to remember that it's the species that's adaptable, not the individual. A feral cat cannot suddenly switch to being happy as a pet cat. There are certain factors that influence which lifestyle is best suited to each individual. And these are very much focused around the genetic makeup, the DNA of the cat, and its early socialization in those first few months of life, what positive exposure it has to people and to other cats. And together, this nature and nurture come and form the cat's temperament or personality and how comfortable it is living alongside others. I really appreciate that it's often really hard when faced with a new cat in your care to know which lifestyle might best suit that individual, particularly when you maybe don't know everything about that cat or it's appearing very fearful in front of you because it's new in this new environment. But doing a bit of detective work and really taking the time to find out who that cat is and what its needs are, we can help ensure we get the best outcome for that cat to live its happiest life. And after all, that's why we do what we do. In addition to cats as a species being adaptable to different lifestyles, they also have very adaptable social lives. They're what we call a socially flexible species. And by that, I mean that cats live on a continuum from those individuals at one end that are completely solitary, hunting small prey, actively defending their own territories outdoors, and hostile to other cats, to those at the other end of the spectrum who can live in social groups, but these social groups only exist in free-roaming individuals when there's sufficient food sources that are predictable and clumped. For example, caregivers putting out large amounts of food, or large amounts of rodents clumped around a particular farm, for example, because the grain stores are bringing in high density of prey for the cats. And the cats themselves are not a random hodgepodge mix of individuals. They're a very well-designed group. They're usually related, usually the females, predominantly the females, adult females, mothers, sisters, daughters, aunties, and their young offspring. And when those male offspring start to reach sexual maturity, they will leave the group. And those individuals that are not group members are treated with hostility, and there will be preferred friendships within the group. So it's clear to see that there's set rules that need to be in place for cats to actually want to form groups. And these groups are not changeable all the time. It can't just be that one cat can replace another. So we've learned quite a lot about cats in quite a short space of time. Why does it matter? Well, I think the first thing we need to really appreciate together is that cats are a complicated species. We've really just scratched the surface. And that, because they are so complicated, it makes it really hard for us to do the job that we do well, because there is so much to learn. But for me, I think it would be no fun loving something that was easy. We like a challenge. Cats inhabit so many parts of our planet, across cold climates, across hot climates, across different environments, from city apartments to rural farms. They are adept at reproducing and finding food, and they can easily migrate to new locations if the current one's not working for them. With that, numbers can rapidly increase and multiply, and that's where the problem lies. With increasing numbers beyond what the resources can cope with to support cats, we see suffering. And that is not the outcome that we want for this beautiful species. It's therefore so important that we find cat-friendly ways to ensure populations are managed and individuals have their needs met. And some of the ways that we can go about doing this is learning about cats and understanding what's best for them. Every day, I learn something new about cats without fail. whether it's through my own research, through reading the research of others, through observations and interactions with cats, or through hearing other people's experiences. Even if it's revisiting information I already know, coming back to it at a different time and looking at it through a different lens can make such a difference. I remind myself daily to look at situations through a cat's eyes, not just mine. That makes a massive difference. Cats certainly take us on a journey, and it is one where we never stop learning and evolving for them. So what happens when we learn? We realise that confinement for cats is extremely stressful. Cats hide pain and distress. Remember, there are prey species as well as a predator species. Remember, inhibition is one of their behavioural strategies. Nobody's going to come and help them in their eyes because they're a solitary survivor. So they need to be as stoic as possible. But we need to remember that the absence of overt behaviour does not mean that the cat's experience is positive. So for me, looking at these photographs, we can see a cat's resting, but actually it's only its posture that's resting. If we look at the body language and the context and we take into account our understanding of cats and the species they are, we can start to recognise that these cats are in an inhibited state because they're not coping in the environment that they're in. What also can we do with this new learning? Will we realise that holding cats for prolonged periods in cages needs to be our last resort, only once all other options have been considered? We need to manage cat populations to reduce numbers of cats needing to come into our homing centres and shelters. And we need to work with our communities to provide alternative solutions. I just want to end by saying we owe it to cats. Thank you very much.
As you were listening to Sarah, what made you go, what, really? I hope you had at least one of those moments. I love them. You've learned something, or at the very least, it's piqued your interest and you want to know more. The thing about knowledge is that once you learn something new, you may end up changing your attitude or behaviour. That's evolution. Remember the cat-friendly principle, evolve for cats. You may just be thinking, I know all this, and that's great too. But as Sarah said, it doesn't do any harm to reinforce what you know and take time to consider whether this knowledge is reflected in the way you work with cats. So, what resonated with you about this presentation? Did you previously appreciate how self-reliant the species is? What about the cat's role as predator and prey? Have you ever viewed their lives from that perspective? Take a few moments to think about the new ideas you're taking away with you about the cat as a species. Actually, you can take a bit longer this time, as we're going to have a 10-minute break now before our next talk. See you shortly. Welcome back. So Sarah has told us about the species and the potential implications of new learning, and now it's my turn to apply that to approaching the bigger picture of cat population management, asking the question, when it comes to our local cat population, do we have a problem? Hello everyone. My presentation is entitled, Do We Have a Problem? Introduction to Cat Population Management and Population Dynamics. Now, there's a lot to unpick in that title, so let's leave the first bit for now and talk about what we mean when we say cat population management. You might ask, why do we need to manage cat populations in the first place? The simple answer is that they can soon get out of control when it comes to numbers. How does that happen? Well, two main things stand out for me. The reason we have so many cats is to do with the nature of cats as a species, and also the nature of humans too. For example, cats are extremely adaptable creatures. They have successfully populated most land masses throughout the world. They are incredibly successful reproductively, and they migrate easily to seek out a reliable and plentiful food source when their current one becomes scarce. When it comes to the role that humans play, we shouldn't shy away from identifying what fuels this population explosion. People can't help feeding cats they don't own. It's like a compulsion for many. What most people don't understand is the wider implications of this, or what responsibility they technically assume when they feed a cat to such an extent that that food becomes the predictable and plentiful food source that leads to reproduction and more cats. The concept that you might feed with the intention to neuter an unowned free-roaming cat to improve cat welfare is not something that most people know instinctively. The same applies to owned pet cats. When the owned pet cats have kittens or the owner's life circumstances change, those cats may be abandoned onto the streets. After all, they may think there is always someone there to feed them, they'll be okay. This looks to me like the perfect first two ingredients needed to have an ever-increasing population of cats. Although, of course, that's a very simplistic way of viewing it. It's not that straightforward. Okay, so what about population dynamics? What does that mean? Well, firstly, let's be clear about something, and this is really important. Not all cats are the same. Sure, they are the same species, the domestic cat, Felis catus, but they differ greatly in their ability or need to live with people and the lifestyle they are adopted to. This diagram shows this as a spectrum, with on the far left those cats that avoid people and live in uninhabited areas, adapted to free roaming and hunting to survive, and at the other end of the spectrum, the pet cat, that likes being around people and lives with them in their homes. And then you have all the cats that sit on different parts of that spectrum. We've put some types of cats on here to illustrate. The true feral cat on the left is unseen, a real wild animal, living out of sight of people. Those cats that many may refer to as feral cats are, like the true feral, indeed unsocialized with people, but they are more visible as they live in our towns, cities and villages. They are the street cats, adapted to free roaming but tolerating people being around as they are often their source of food. The pet cat is self-explanatory, but in between the street cat and the pet cat is actually named the in-betweener. This is the cat that has lived previously as a pet, but unsuccessfully. They need something different to the pet and the street cat. So you see, it's important we identify different cats as they have different needs. When we talk about population dynamics, we talk about all those cats on the spectrum and all the different populations, the free roaming, the shelter population, those cats in homes. They don't all stay in the same place. They can move from one population to another. For example, the pet cat that strays and doesn't return home, the pet cat that is relinquished to a shelter or homing centre. Population dynamics is also understanding how populations increase and decrease through factors such as births, deaths, cats coming in and cats leaving to go elsewhere. So if you're in the part of the world where you see cats every day outdoors, bear in mind that they all have backstories and are unique individuals. So maybe that cat scavenging from a bin is a street cat. Maybe that one crossing the road is an owned pet with access outdoors. Maybe that ginger cat was a pet and he's been abandoned by his owner. It's important to know this, or at least consider it when we decide to intervene. I'll explain. Let's look at the lifestyle spectrum again, but focus on the street cat, the in-betweener and the pet, as these are the cats that live in our communities and the ones where their populations directly impact on us in one way or another. If we don't manage these populations, they soon get out of control. People are not neutering their pets, people are feeding cats on the streets they don't own, and cats are breeding. Complaints occur, and maybe some of these cats are taken off the streets into homing centres, but their cages soon get full of cats that shouldn't be there, as they don't want to be pets. So there is stress, there is overcrowding and disease. It's horrid. Ideally, what we want is for all cats to live in the right place to suit their needs in an environment that fulfills those needs and they are accepted by their community. Sadly, that's not the case in many parts of the world. And when the environment can no longer support these cats, whether that is free roaming outdoors or even in homing centres, this leads to disease, suffering and poor welfare. Now, at this point, you may be asking, do I have a problem within my own community? Well, the cats may be struggling, but it becomes more visible when the numbers get high. People get concerned about the transmission of zoonotic diseases, which are those that travel from animals to people. They complain about the noise when cats fight or mate. They complain when their bins are knocked over and stuff spread everywhere. When wildlife or endangered species are threatened by the sheer numbers of predators, or when they see dead cats on the side of the road. When people complain, action is taken. But there is no quick fix. Sure, you can do TNR. You can take some friendly cats off the streets to be homed as pets if they are suitable and there's sufficient demand for second-hand cats. But what people find is that somewhere there's this conveyor belt with lots of cats on it that just keep coming. So what is the answer? So let's view this like a jigsaw puzzle. Right, a jigsaw puzzle is a box of bits with fragments of the bigger picture on each one, and they mean nothing in isolation, each individual piece. But when you interlock them and put them all in their rightful place within the bigger picture, you then see the rewards for all your hard work. Cat population management is like a jigsaw puzzle. It's a complex interconnectivity and interdependence of policies, programs, campaigns, attitudes, planning, and collaboration. Most of all, it's about not assuming that this is someone else's responsibility to fix. There are many stakeholders who are partly responsible for the problem, so to be fair, they also need to be part of the solution. Here is our jigsaw puzzle, where we focus on 4 primary stakeholders, although of course there are others. We are looking at pet owners, TNR groups, homing organisations and vet clinics. Let's look at each one of these pieces in turn. Right, pet owners. They need to take responsibility for their pets and seek help before they get into a situation where they have no choice but to abandon them. They need to neuter their pets before they have that accidental litter of kittens, and they need to microchip their cats to show they are taking responsibility and are accountable for them. Of course, they need vets to neuter their pets, and they need homing organisations to support them when they are in need and struggling to care for their pets. What about the TNR groups? Well, TNR groups do an amazing job. For those of us who have never been out in all weathers, engaging in the not very straightforward job of getting unsocialised cats inside traps just when you want them to be there, it's a definite skill and almost exclusively done by volunteers. I'm sure that many of those groups collect data to track their impact over time on the target population, but all we tend to hear about is numbers neutered, which doesn't really tell us anything about what that work has done to stabilise and hopefully reduce that population. There's a relatively small amount of published data on the long-term impact of TNR, so we often have to rely on simulation, such as the modelling done by the Alliance for the Contraception of Dogs and Cats. These 3 papers shown here looked at the most effective and cost-efficient ways to reduce free-roaming cat populations over a 10-year period, and found that front-loaded, high volumes of cats neutered at the outset with frequent revisits reaps rewards. So many people get disheartened when they see figures such as over 75% of the target populations need to be neutered at the outset, as it sounds unachievable. But you must work with the available resources and the restrictions you have, be they finances or veterinary capacity. So if resources are low, you're focusing on one colony at a time, for example, before moving on and then returning regularly to mop up cats immigrating into the area or those that were elusive at the outset. But of course, you need vets to do the neutering. So let's look now at the homing organisations. Homing centres and foster networks too should be part of the cat's journey to a new home and not the destination. So cats coming into the homing sector are there specifically for the purpose of finding a pet home as quickly as possible to meet their needs as an individual. If the cat would not be comfortable or able to live as a pet, then that cat should not be brought into care. If there's no good, solid market for pre-owned cats, then there should be no shelters, because then all you're doing is taking cats off the street and putting them into cages instead to try and solve a problem. And when you put it like that, it doesn't sound very nice. The homing organisation's role in this jigsaw puzzle is to ensure all cats adopted from them are neutered. Their role is to support the community to keep cats in their homes wherever possible and to make adopting a cat as simple and enjoyable a process as they can. So if the underlying theme throughout this has been neuter, then our eyes inevitably fall upon the veterinary profession. For those of you who are in the veterinary profession or work closely with vets, you will know how pressurised and stressful their role has become, with widespread veterinary capacity issues and many other pressures. So what's the impact of that on cat population management? Let's take the UK, for example. The percentage of the pet cat population that's been neutered has declined post-pandemic. Let's take a closer look at this table from a paper published in 2023 on modelling the impact of a high percentage of neutered adult-owned cats on the population growth rate over a 10-year period. Only at 95% and beyond do you see evidence of stabilisation and reduction of the total populations, with a huge impact on the free-roaming cat population once 98% is achieved. You can see the interdependence of all these stakeholders to achieve effective cat population management. So those are our pieces. And when they come together, great things happen. I'm not saying it is easy by any means, but we need to promote the idea of us all taking our share of the responsibility for managing our cat populations if we truly want a world where all cats are living in the right place to suit their individual needs, in an environment that has sufficient resources to fulfil those needs, and they are accepted by their community. Thank you for listening. You have now seen the lifestyle spectrum of the domestic cat diagram in all 3 presentations, and you'll see it again several times over the whole event. It's not a coincidence, as recognising that different cats have different needs is absolutely paramount. Take a moment to think about the situation where you are. Are you seeing more and more cats every year? Do you feel you're keeping on top of things? If you can see the difference and numbers are reducing, how did you achieve that? What was the secret of your success? If you're feeling overwhelmed, was there anything in this talk that made you think, maybe we should do that? Or I hadn't thought about that? Have a moment's reflection. Welcome back. Now we've identified there is a problem, let's be inspired by Harry Eckman as he talks about how exciting and impactful it is to make a strategic plan.
In the previous talk, Vicky Halls took us through the process of establishing that we do indeed have a cat population problem identified. The question now is, what do we do about that? How do we solve that problem? Because as we've heard, it's complicated. I'm Harry Eckman, Global Advisor for Cat Population Management at International iCatCare. And what we need to solve that problem is a strategy, a plan. So let's look at why it's important to plan strategically and the steps to making a strategic plan. Animal welfare has almost always been about reacting and responding to problems. Think about the work that you do. How much of it is reactive, responding to a crisis, firefighting to solve problem after problem, day after day, rescuing a cat here and a cat there? It's hard to find enough time to even pause and think, let alone strategize and plan. We just react, we respond, we help wherever we can, because so much help is needed. But what if things could be different? What if we could be more proactive instead of reactive in our approach? What if we could think about the impact that we wanted to have, the difference that we wanted to make, and work towards it? A strategic plan does exactly that. It allows people and organizations to better anticipate the things that are most likely to happen and prepare accordingly, while always having a goal in mind. I know, I lost you as soon as I mentioned strategic plan. As I said it, even through this screen, I could see your eyes glazing over. No one ever got into animal welfare because they love strategy. But the truth is, if we're serious about wanting to make a difference and improve the lives of cats that so desperately need help, then having a strategic plan is precisely the way to do it. Strategic planning is essential for cat welfare. Whether we're talking about an organization, a group, or a project, a strategic plan establishes a clear direction and structured approach to achieving our goal. By setting specific measurable targets, we can focus our efforts on the most impactful activities, ensuring that we have the resources that we need, like funds and time and personnel, and that we're using them efficiently. This planning process helps prioritize our actions, manage the risks, and prepare us for potential challenges. Having a strategy also aligns the efforts of staff and volunteers and other stakeholders by ensuring that everyone is working towards common objectives. Now, there's always going to be a need to rescue and respond. We'll always need to react to problems when they inevitably still happen. But with a strategic plan, we can also better prepare for those and be more proactive in how we approach them. And with a strategic plan, it's not the one thing that you do, it's the collection of things that you do that are either aimed at preventing a problem or reducing the harm caused by it. Either way, the impact we can have and the difference that it can make for cats and communities is huge. So what might all this mean for you and the work that you do? What are the steps that you can take to making a strategic plan? There are 7 essential steps to making a strategic plan, 7 questions that we need to be able to answer. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's getting in your way? What are your priorities? How are you going to get to where you want to be? How will you know that you're making progress? And who is going to be responsible? And we're going to look at each one of those now. Where are you now? It's hard to figure out how to get to where you want to be if you don't know where you're starting from. So this is about understanding the situation and your current position, defining the problem. The crucial thing about this step is to be totally objective. This isn't about how you intend things to be or how you would like them to be or even how you think others see them. This is about understanding how things really are and the problems you're trying to address. Now we need to start by answering some essential questions so that we can plan properly. So what are the problems that you're trying to address? Well, how many cats are there? How many colonies? How many males and females? Is there excessive breeding? Are there places that have higher or lower densities of cats and colonies? And where is welfare the poorest? And are there complaints? And where's the greatest number of complaints? And what are those complaints? Is it nuisance or noise or numbers or trash or feeding? And does the community, for the most part, like the cats or just tolerate the cats? And how are feeders and carers perceived, or NGOs that might be doing the trapping? And do you have vets that are capable of supporting a TNR program? And beyond the problems with cats, what are the factors and forces that influence your work? What capacity do you have? What funding do you have? What number of volunteers? What amount of equipment? And what's the number of available veterinary spaces? It's essential to be able to answer these questions, not only to better plan based on your capacity, but critically to have a baseline to evaluate against to measure how successful you're being. Doing things like a cat population census to have an idea of the numbers and locations of cat colonies, or an organizational assessment to understand what capacity and resources you actually have available, are essential. And it's only once we know exactly what situation that we're dealing with can we properly set our goals and plan. Where do you want to be? When we're always working reactively, it's easy to lose sight of our goal and our purpose. So ask yourself, what impact do you want to have? What are your goals? What are the things that you want to accomplish? Defining a clear purpose is key to succeeding here. Now, it might seem obvious, but unless you know where you want to be, you can't begin to actually plan how you're going to get there. If you're a TNR organization, your goal isn't just saying, well, there's a lot of cats that need sterilizing, so I guess we'll go and sterilize them. Your goal is the impact of what you do on those cats, what happens as a result of your activities. Using the information that you would have got from a population census, you'll know how many cats there are and how many complaints there are, what the level of welfare is like. So your goals are going to be things like reducing the number of cats on the street, reducing the number of litters being born, reducing the number of nuisance complaints, improving community attitudes towards the cats, and improving the welfare of cats. But reduce numbers by how much? Reduce complaints by how many? Improve community attitudes, how? Improve cat welfare in what way? We need to be specific when we're thinking strategically. For example, for a TNR program to be successful, at least 75% of the target population needs to be neutered. That's a specific and essential goal, but how you achieve it is going to depend on a number of factors. What's getting in your way? If we're going to try and do some of the things that we've already talked about, reducing cat numbers, reducing complaints, improving cat welfare, we know that there are many obstacles to achieving these goals, problems that need to be solved. To help solve these problems, we need to be able to answer 3 questions. Where is the problem? Who's in the best position to fix or prevent this problem? And how do you create incentives and opportunities for them to do so? So let's think about that first goal that we want to achieve, reducing cat numbers. Maybe your first thought is to do a TNR campaign. Those can reduce numbers, right? But what if most of the cats are owned and just allowed to roam? Well, then the problem isn't unowned cats, it's owned cats. And if that's the case, well then who's in the best position to fix or prevent that problem? Well, that would be the owners. And if that's the case, then TNR probably isn't the right approach. Maybe we need to look at responsible pet ownership interventions as a way of reducing abandonment or unwanted litters. Maybe some kind of subsidized neutering campaign would be an incentive for owners to get their cats neutered. And even if we are sure that most of the cats are unowned and TNR is an appropriate tool to use, what happens if the community is adamantly against having cats on the street? Well, if that's the case, then TNR isn't going to be supported by them. Maybe we need to look at a community engagement outreach to get the community to understand the benefits of TNR and get them on side first, so that we can introduce TNR a little further down the line. But then perhaps the problem is just our own capacity. We know that for a TNR program to be successful, at least 75% of the target population needs to be neutered. But perhaps you're a small team of volunteers with limited funds. How are you going to neuter all of those cats? If we don't properly identify the problems and barriers that exist and work out the best way to fix them, we're just going to be repeating what we've always done or what others have always done previously. But now we've identified them, we can work out a plan to overcome them. What are your priorities? Once you're clear on where you are, where you want to be, and what the obstacles are, you need to set your priorities. And priorities are based on three things: your capacity, the importance of the problem in relation to all the other problems, and the impact that you believe that you can have. Priorities are a balance between understanding what you can realistically achieve and recognizing that you can't fix everything at the same time. And not fixing something now doesn't mean that you don't get to fix it at some point in the future. It just means looking for places that have the most potential impact. Now, through your population census, maybe it's clear where the places are that have the highest densities of cats and colonies, or that the welfare of cats is poorer, or where you have more nuisance complaints by the community. These are important factors, so maybe these are places that should be priorities. But deciding on your priorities is also going to depend on what capacity you have, how many volunteers you have, what resources and time you have, where's the most geographically practical place for you to work. And considering these two things, where is important and what capacity you have, where do you think you can have the greatest impact? Priorities are the fine-tuning of our goals. By prioritizing, we're being realistic about what we can achieve and then can plan accordingly. How will you get to where you want to be? You know where you are, you know where you want to be, you know what's getting in your way, and you've set your priorities. Well, now we make a plan. The reason why being strategic is so important is that it allows us to look at all of these things, these complicated things, and put them into order. Break them down into smaller, specific, manageable, achievable, realistic tasks and goals. Now, there's a process called backwards planning. With each priority, you start from the end point that you want to get to, your goal, and you work your way backwards. You map each step from that end point back to the start. And with each step backwards, you use one simple phrase. In order to do that, we need to. For example, in order to successfully trap a cat, I need to have a trap. I need to know when the cat is around in order to set the trap at the right time. I need to have food to bait the trap. I need the cat to be hungry enough to want to enter the trap to eat the food. You use the phrase and those steps are revealed. But it's not just about outlining all the steps. The order is important too. Some things need to happen first in order for something else to happen. There's no point in setting a trap if you don't have any food to bait it with. It's about being systematic in our approach, and obviously the more complex the problem, the more layers and steps there are. In order to neuter 75% of a cat population, we need to know how many cats there are, how many people we have, what number of spaces are available at the vet, how much each surgery will cost, how much equipment we have to trap and transport the cats to and from the vet. Creating this path means we now have a plan. How will we know if we're making progress? How will we know if we reach 75% of our target population? Let's find out. How will you know if you're making progress? Imagine your strategy like planning a journey on Google Maps. You mark where you start and where you want to finish, but along the way you're receiving almost constant feedback about your location, where to continue, where to change direction, how much progress you're making towards the end destination. In order to know if we're progressing towards achieving our goals, we need to be monitoring and evaluating as we go. What we measure our progress and success against is the information that we gathered at the beginning, that cat population census that told us things like the number of cats and the level of welfare. We need to make sure that each colony, population and location is monitored. We obviously want to reach our goal of neutering 75% of the cat population, but we also want to measure the impact of that activity. We want to see an increase in welfare and over time a decrease in numbers, or at the very least no further increase in kittens, in abandonment. And we want to see a reduction in the number of nuisance complaints. Now, we should repeat the census after a certain period of time so that we can see the difference between our baseline, where we started from, and our goals, where we are now, or where we're going to be in the future. We also want to see how effective and efficient we are in regard to our own capacity. There are always lessons to be learned. Not meeting a goal now doesn't mean that we failed, but it does mean that we might need to reevaluate what we do or how we do it. Who's going to be responsible? It always comes down to people. Whatever it is that needs to be done, planned, or organized, or managed, it's people that will have to do it. Determining who's accountable and responsible for each task and whether they have the necessary knowledge, skills, capacity, and commitment to undertake it is hugely important. You can have the best plan in the world, but it's nothing unless you have the people to implement it. If we really want to make a positive difference to the welfare of cats and the communities that they live in, then we need to be strategic in our approach. Having a strategic plan means that not only are we clear about our goals, but we know how to achieve them, and importantly, that we can measure our success for the organisation, for the communities that we work in, and for all the cats that we're able to help. Thank you.
How do you feel now? Is this a compelling argument for planning strategically before you start a TNR program? Maybe we should always refer to these as cat population management programs, as TNR is one piece within the jigsaw puzzle of activities that need to take place, all the way from legislation to the behaviour of people who feed cats on the streets. If you're already a fan of strategic planning and you're running a successful cat population management program, how can you share your experience and knowledge with others? If you want to know more, what action will you take after listening to Harry? Take a moment and think, and make some notes about what you may do differently. Welcome back. Now, if there are any of you thinking, I know how to fix this, we'll find homes for these cats in other countries, then this next presentation is for you. Natalie Dalgray will not be telling you whether this is a good or bad idea, but she will be explaining how important it is to be clear about the implications for the future welfare of the cats involved.
Hi, I'm Natalie Dalgray, and today I'm going to be talking about homing cats to other countries and the implications of this. So when we think about cat populations, especially around that piece of rehoming and relocation, we have quite significant populations of pets, cats around the world. Estimates are putting them at exceeding probably 373 million. It's a lot more difficult to really fully estimate the number of unowned cats. We don't have reliable data from around the world on that, but some people have estimated that to be as high as 600 million. So potentially out of all of the cats out there, 2/3 of them are potentially falling more into that unowned bracket. And there are a number of reasons for this. Cats are very successful. They're very adaptable. They're very good at breeding and increasing their numbers. And they are able to migrate quite easily. And we know that cats have successfully colonised all continents around the world except for Antarctica. But even within more local communities, when food resources and things dry up, then cats are quite happy to migrate to other areas where they may be able to find those resources. There are also some human factors that really do contribute to this sort of potential overpopulation piece that we see in some areas. And that's because as people, we do feed free roaming cats, and that enables them to be more reproductively successful. But also sometimes, unfortunately, we get abandonment of pet cats into either colonies or if they've not been neutered, sometimes the abandonment of pet cats can help establish a colony. And that failure to neuter piece goes across the board. If populations of cats, be they free roaming community cats or street cats, or be they pet cats, if they're not neutered, we're going to get increased numbers of kittens. And the more kittens we have, the more risk we have of these colonies being established. And in response to this, we tend to see within ourselves, our rehoming organisations, and those of us that are individuals that are really interested in cat welfare and think it's important, we recognise that this sometimes can be a problem. It's compromising their welfare, and we often want to be doing actions that remove them from that current situation with the intention of hopefully giving them a better life. Sometimes also we have to intervene in these situations where maybe there's been complaints from the community. So populations of cats, colonies of cats may create mess, they create noise, they can create smell, they may attract rodents, which hopefully in turn they deal with, but there's all these factors that may result in local communities complaining about the presence of cats, and so interventions are often required. And sometimes this sort of relocation piece, these moving of cats to other countries where they're adopted and found homes, is seen as a really positive solution. And again, there are economic, cultural and environmental factors that drive that. But when your other alternatives really are permanent confinement into, say, a shelter or death, you can see that relocation is a very attractive option for people. We also have to consider how this fits in with what else is going on. And homing of cats to other countries is very much linked with what's happening on the ground and how those populations of unowned cats are managed. And that in turn is actually then influenced by the lifestyle of the cats that are needing rehoming. And when we think about those lifestyles and what's sort of driving sometimes this overpopulation piece, it's really our feral cats, our street cats and our pet cats. Probably less so truly the feral cats, because they don't want to be around people. They live very separately to people. They may be contributing genetically to some of these populations, but they're not necessarily the cats that you see out and about in our urban areas or in sort of colonies, maybe in rural properties. And those cats are predominantly what we sort of call street cats, but also pet cats as well. In countries where free roaming cats are very common, there's a lot of mixing and matching between what is a pet cat and what is a street cat. But regardless if they're not neutered, these populations are going to grow, and these populations then either directly or indirectly feed into the burden on our homing centres and our fostering networks. We do have to think about these lifestyles and how these cats are suited to live, because pet cats are cats that are very comfortable with close proximity with people and don't mind sort of physical and social interaction with people. The other end of the spectrum, these cats are less comfortable with that, and that does have an implication. And when we're thinking about this sort of relocation piece as being a positive thing, it definitely is on the increase in some parts of the world. So this data from the UK is, and Cats Protection in their Cats report is showing that numbers of relocation type adoptions are increasing. But when we think about it as being truly a positive solution, we do have to make sure that we're really fully considering both the welfare of the individual, but also there are some important disease implications that may exist with these types of programs. And these are things that affect both the cat as an individual, but also the other cats and pets that it may come in contact with, and also for people as well. So when we think about that we're not placing the cat into a situation which isn't good for their welfare. Some of these cats may be cats that really are not comfortable with close proximity to people and the social interaction that people that are adopting a pet cat may expect. And that can cause significant stress to some individual cats. There's also some disease implications on that as well. Stress and disease are very, very closely linked. And so we may also have some implications on the cat's physical health as well as their mental health as a result of that stress. There's also that stress piece around the long distance travel. So relocation from one country to another may involve a plane journey. It may involve a very long car journey or a journey in the back of a van or a truck with other cats. It may involve ferry crossings. There's quite a few things there that may lead to a period of stress. As I said, there's also that demands on the home that this cat may not be able to meet. They may not be comfortable with that degree of social interaction that's become expected of them when they've been adopted. And these are cats that have often been very comfortable with the freedom of choice for where they are and how they spend their time. And they may now need to be restricted to more of an indoor environment. There's also that wider physical environment as well. These cats may be changing to a different climate. They may be moving from a warm, sunny country into a far more temperate country, a country where maybe there's significant snow in the winter and they can no longer go outside during that time. And then there's going to be some different population dynamics and population density as well. Some of these cats may be very comfortable living in a colony of related individuals, the way they did in their home country, but they may not be comfortable living in an environment with other cats that they're not related to. There may be inter-cat conflict and different social pressures between them and the other cats or other pets that they're meeting in this environment. And then we've also got the piece around exposure to or introduction to novel diseases. And cats carry their own diseases and their own strains of diseases, but when we're moving them from country to country, we run the risk of some clash around that. So when we think about the individual cat, but also that risk of potentially other cats in the environment from infectious agents, we do have to sort of think, okay, at least on the viral side of things, most of these are non-zoonotic, so they're not going to be affecting people, but they are very easily transmitted between cats. And so we may be getting different strains of virus being shared between cats where their immune system may not recognise this and challenge it. And a really good example of that is sadly the case that we've had over the last 2 years with Cyprus and the novel coronavirus, feline coronavirus strain that they've had, which is a recombinant coronavirus that unfortunately increases the risk of exposed cats of contracting FIP. And we have now seen this particular strain of coronavirus present in other European countries from cats that have been rehomed and relocated out of Cyprus. So when we have these kind of situations, unfortunately, we are potentially putting a wider population of cats at risk of a new strain of disease, which is concerning. We also have the risk of reoccurrence of disease within the individual, so they may experience disease symptoms again themselves and be infectious to the other cats in the environment. Herpes virus is a really good example of that one because, again, when cats have had herpes virus, they do get recurrent infections. This is a little photo of my own cat who had herpes as a kitten, and unfortunately it's led him slightly later in life to have some eye disease problems. So there's also a cost burden and a time and caregiver burden associated with some of these conditions too, which is probably important that new adopters might be aware of. And then there's that individual stress piece and the impact that has on the immune system. And there's a risk that it means these cats are slightly slower to clear the infection while they're going through that period of stress of moving into a new home. There is also a zoonotic disease risk. So some of these infectious agents that are carried by cats can be transmitted to people. So ringworms, probably the most obvious example of that, but generally these tend to be bacterial, mycotic or parasitic agents that are more likely to cause zoonotic diseases. We also run the risk of some of these diseases potentially being vector-borne as well. So they're spread by things like ticks and mosquitoes and midges and sandflies. And some of these insects that can spread the disease may be present in a country, but if there's not the cat or the dog population that has these infectious agents, that disease is normally not considered present in the country. But when we're relocating animals in this way, we do run the risk of introducing some of these diseases and having them become established in some of these vector populations. And these can be something that, the veterinary community may not be used to treating because it's just one of these things that you maybe learnt about at university, but because it wasn't present in the country that you work in, you've not really ever had to think about it. You don't really ever have to manage it or treat it. So we do run the risk of novel diseases coming in and a veterinary population that just may not have the skill set to be able to manage that appropriately. So when we're thinking about rehoming to other countries, there's really two kind of really key things that we need to think about first. And we have to consider, is it the right thing for the population of cats that we're dealing with? If they are really more on that feral street cat end of things and really are not comfortable with close human proximity, maybe those are ones that we really shouldn't be relocating as pet cats. But even within that, even if we're happy that it is an option for the vast majority of the cats that we are dealing with, we always have to decide, is it the right thing for this cat as an individual? And this is a lovely video that Vicky shared with me showing this cat that was rehomed as a blind cat from Romania. And it does the circling all the time. And this is obviously very distressing to watch. As a vet, I find it distressing and want to do a neurological exam of this cat because I'm quite worried there's some things going on. But this also could be a stereotypic behaviour that is this cat's way of coping in this environment. And we can see in this video, I can spot 2 other cats in the background of this video. And I think I counted 6 microchip feeders in the background. So there's obviously a significant population of other cats living in this environment. And I'm sure this cat is much loved, and probably the adopter really truly thought they're doing the right thing. But sometimes it may not be the right thing for that individual. And that really does have to be considered. Ultimately, is this animal's welfare going to suffer through this relocation? Should we be making some other decisions about this cat? So when we're thinking about this sort of rehoming piece, and if you're going to be doing it, then please do it well, I think is the argument. We need to be thinking about that education piece. So pre-relocation, it's making sure that we're doing the required health checks, vaccines and parasite control. We need to make sure we've got appropriate stress management for that transportation piece. And we really need to be making sure we're choosing the right cats to relocate. Post-relocation, it's really important that the potential adopters of these cats really truly know what they're getting, what some of the risk factors are, understand the potential pros and cons. And we also need to make sure that there's a piece for the vets and the veterinary nurses in that country, so they understand maybe what conditions possibly could be coming with this cat, things that maybe we aren't able to easily test for to get a definite answer, but we do need to be aware of. In terms of the alternative, well, really, if we have strategic, well-managed and well-executed population management programs, so at this stage, really TNR is our best intervention, then actually, we probably, if we get that piece right, we may not really require a huge amount of cat relocation. These are decisions that may not be required because we are able to adequately manage that cat population in its home country. Thank you all for listening.
I know some of you, for perfectly understandable reasons, home cats abroad. It may be that you just don't have enough pet homes in your own country, and you're trying to ensure that cats don't end up in shelters indefinitely. Take some time to think. If this is something you do routinely, is there an alternative? What could you do to reduce the numbers, even in a small way? Are you monitoring the cats in their future homes abroad to make sure it's working out for them? Are you actively pursuing a neutering campaign in your area, for example? Why don't you have a think and make some notes? We've come to the halfway point in our first day of presentations in iCatConnect, so you can reflect, take a walk, get some fresh air, have something to eat, anything you like for the next 30 minutes. Have fun and see you shortly. Welcome back. Let's listen to Fiona Woodhouse now from Hong Kong. She will be telling us about her experience to illustrate what good cat population management looks like.
Hi, I'm Dr. Fiona Woodhouse. I work for the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Hong Kong, and I'm here to talk to you about our cat population management programs, the different elements, and how you can look at data to assess your output and your successes. So let's have a little bit of background about Hong Kong. So we have a long history of cat ownership. In the 1980s was our last rabies outbreak. We had a large population of owned and unowned free-roaming cats. We had very little access to veterinary resources, very low neutering and spaying rate. We also had very little knowledge of responsible pet ownership concepts, and also a very, very reactive approach to animal management. So let's have a look at the scale of the issue in Hong Kong. So at the start of the 1980s, when we were having the rabies outbreak, our Census and Statistics Department did a survey, and they estimated there were over 130,000 pet cats. That dropped to around 46,000 in the late 90s, and started to increase again in the mid-2000s, going up to around 100,000. And at the last official census, there was estimated to be almost 190,000 pet cats living in Hong Kong. But of course, this is surveying pet cats. So what about the free-roaming non-owned cats and also our working cats? These are probably not included in this survey. So a bit more background to Hong Kong. As we said, we had a large number of street cats or free-roaming cats and a high abandonment rate. And you can see on the left of your screen, the green box there was what we called a cat box. And the concept was that if you had a cat you didn't want, you could open the top hatch, drop it in, and the SPCA would go around and collect these. We had 5 or 6 scattered around Hong Kong. The issue with this is obviously we were to some extent enabling abandonment, and consequently we had a very high euthanasia rate with a lot of sick cats on the street. So we've heard about the different elements that we need to address. So we can look at the results. What can it look like in terms of actions you can take, or actually the outputs that you may see? So you can see here, again, we know we need to engage people. We need to raise awareness and educate them. We need to inform people about the issues. We need to encourage them to accept the different programs we may have and to engage with those programs as well. And we need to tackle different elements. We need to tackle policymakers, legislators, management of facilities, community leaders, etc. And we need to make sure that we tackle the different segments of the cat population that need addressing. We can also measure our success through the number of volunteers and partners we have in terms of direct action or supporting actions, and how often they engage with us. We can also look at access to veterinary services. We can see what the veterinary environment is like. We can see how many vets we have, how many clinics, how many programs that we have that are supporting our cat population management aims, low-cost, free desexing programs, and partners that may be supporting you in terms of direct action. So these are some of the programs that the SPCA has to assist with cat population management. We have the various animal birth control programs. Through our vet clinic, we promote responsible pet ownership and neutering and spaying. We have a spay-neuter assistance program that provides discount vouchers for use in private clinics or to offset the cost of a routine spay-neuter procedure. We have our foster parent program that helps with the offspring of unwanted or abandoned or free-roaming cats. We can rescue and rehome abandoned socialized cats, and we can rescue and return to field cats that are unsocialized and can go back to the field through our Cat Colony Care program. We have the TNR program, which is the Cat Colony Care program, and we also have our low-cost spay-neuter vehicle that goes out into the community and provides those services. So here is our latest vehicle, number 2. And this goes out into the community and provides low-cost desexing for both cats and dogs. You can measure your success with these programs by looking at the output. And when we started with this vehicle, it was going to the rural areas, targeting areas with low awareness in terms of spay-neuter and responsible pet ownership concepts. and with little access to veterinary services. And so initially there was low demand, but gradually as word spread and the key opinion leaders in the area, the volunteers and the grandmas in the villages were spreading the word, we got increased demand. And interestingly, you can see that this is split on species, and at the start there was a big focus on dogs, and then over time the focus of the vehicle has switched to cats. So this is our Spay Neuter Assistance Program. This is a discount voucher that allowed you to get a discount off the routine costs of spaying neuter a cat or a dog. And this encouraged responsible pet ownership, assisted owners with cost concerns or who were very cost conscious, and also allowed us to engage with partners in the community. So we had 85 collaborating vet practices. So here is the output of our Spay Neuter Assistance Program. And again, at the outset, when there was low awareness, we had a small demand, but over time as awareness increased and we were able to expand funding, we were able to increase uptake of the program. And initially we had a more or less 50-50 split between dogs and cats, but again, as you can see over time, with the increase of cat ownership becoming more popular, cat owners are starting to take up the majority of the owners that are interested in this. So we also have our cat colony care program that focuses on addressing the needs of free roaming feral or street cats. And we have been running this program since 2000. We work very closely with the government in terms of microchipping and return when they are identified if they get caught up in routine stray control. And we also work with private clinics as well as many organizations and community groups to help the program achieve its aim. So rescue and rehoming is very important. So we can go out and rescue abandoned socialized cats and rehome them through our adoption program. But also we can identify and rescue under socialized cats that are street cats or feral cats, and those can be returned to field through the cat TNR program, our cat colony care program. Our foster parent program is very important. This helps us with litters of kittens that may be separated from their mother. Or through this program, we can actually assist with fostering, socializing, and rehabilitating kittens and cats that may have been found on the street with an aim of socializing them and being able to rehome them. It's very important to mainstream, to get these concepts out there, to get people to be aware of them, to engage, to play different roles. So we can actually target our output in terms of people that may engage with specific events like community directed events in terms of vaccination drives and also desexing weeks, desexing clinics that may be done in the field, and also just inquiries, people coming by, chatting with you, finding out more about what you're doing, etc. These programs are also very good in terms of mainstreaming, getting out there, doing surveys. You can collect baseline data that may be useful for later. You can look at segmenting of the population. You can find out how many feral cats are around or street cats are around, the habits of the cat owners. Are they free roaming cats? You know, what's their attitudes towards the different things that you're looking at, such as spaying and neutering and vaccinating. It's also important to work with the community, with, again, legislators and policymakers, so that people are aware of the issue, that something needs to be done and they really think about what could be done and also play a role in doing what needs to be done as well. So let's have a look at some of the things that we can measure and have measured or can see in Hong Kong as a result of some of the actions of the SPCA along with other partners over the many years. So if you look at this data from 2005 to 2018, you can see the trend of increasing cat ownership, but you can also see that there's different trends in terms of where cats are sourced. In terms of being more adopted, people may be directly adopting from the street as well, and also less cats are bought from the pet shops as well. You can also see how we've looked at behaviour change. So again, back in 2005, about 50% of the cat population were neutered, but coming up to 2018, it's almost 80%, which is a pretty good figure in terms of cat population management. And also you can see vaccination rates have stayed more or less the same. But again, an important factor is actually the concept of abandonment is less popular, decreasing. And we can look at baseline data linked to attitudes, etc. And we can see in terms of cats being euthanized and rehomed, the difference there. Apologies for the mistake on the slide for 2018. That should be 867 and 815. I will say that in terms of cats rehomed, there are now more rehoming organisations, so the figure would actually be higher. But this data is combined data from the government plus the SPCA. So we can look at the overall neutering rate. So this is the neutering of all segments of the population. And unfortunately, we don't split this from dogs and cats, but it would be neutering cats, own cats coming through the client-facing vet clinics. It would be own cats coming through the low-cost spay-neuter vehicle, and also free roaming unowned cats coming through the TNR program as well. And you can see a nice inverse relationship that as we are boosting the numbers of animals that are neutered, we can see that reflective rate on the decrease of overall cat euthanasia rate, so dropping significantly. We will also talk about the output of the programs, so educating, again, raising awareness. So we'll publish magazines, doing special interest stories, case studies, and talking to different volunteers, etc., aiming again to mainstream and get further engagement. Here we can see one of the graphics that we did for our 20th anniversary, talking about the number of cats we'd neutered in total, the 90% drop in the euthanasia rate of cats, the number of cat colonies around Hong Kong, how many were active, how many cat colonies actually reduced to zero population by assessment, and the number of volunteers, approximately 1,500. Or 1,400, and the number of cooperating community schools, management offices, and government departments. So talking to people and encouraging people to see the output, and also hoping that other people would then engage. And this is another infographic looking at the distribution of the cat colony program and the different cats and the different population densities. And again, spreading that message. This is one of the more central locations in Hong Kong, in Wan Chai on Hong Kong Island. And we had a cat festival promoting all things cat, but mainly focusing on trap, neuter, and return for cats. And so again, sort of engaging with the public, this helped to raise awareness and also help with fundraising efforts as well. So here you can see one of the things that you can do. You can study a population specifically. This was a nice study for us. It was on an island called Lama. It's a closed population, so less risk of abandonment because you have to go by ferry to abandon your cat there, less risk of recruitment or immigration. And this is a linear count, so it's a representative count that the numbers seen are only a reflection of the general population. When we first counted, we saw 107 street cats. Those are cats not enrolled in our program yet, and also cats that are. And over time, that's decreased significantly to the point that we saw 0 cats. We've seen 0 street cats for the past 2 years. So we've just done a 2024 survey, and that was also no cats present, but 2 owned cats were seen. Here again, we're looking at the cats neutered under the Cat Colony Care Program, our TNR program, and looking at the overall euthanasia rate of cats. This is obviously a segment that contributes massively to the stray cat population and the nuisance stray cat population that may be targeted for stray control by the government proactively in response to complaints. And you can see again that nice inverse relationship that as the numbers of street cats neutered each year increase and the population, the percentage of the population overall will be not able to reproduce, we see the reduction in terms of cat euthanasia. Again, many of the free-roaming unowned cats are actually the sources of a lot of litters of kittens. And you can see again a nice relationship here that as we're neutering the street cats, we are seeing less kittens being euthanized. So this is linked to decreasing number coming in, and also being able to upscale programs such as the foster program to deal with the numbers that are coming in. So I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your support for cats and unowned cats around the world. And also I'd like to say thank you to my colleagues, peers, veterinary community, supporters, our volunteers, and everybody else in Hong Kong who supports cats and the robust programs we have in terms of cat population management.
Fiona has given you here an example of a comprehensive and effective cat population management programme, and how data can show the enormous impact that a long-term programme such as this has on the overall cat population, such as the 90% reduction in the euthanasia rate as the neutering rate increases, and after 20 years of their cat colony care programme. Collecting and ideally publishing this kind of data enables others to view what has been done and see the evidence. If you do it like this, for example, how well it works. What have you discovered, having listened to Fiona and the other speakers so far, that working to neuter as many cats as you can when funds allow is not as efficient or as effective as you thought? What can you do with this information? You can see where strategic thinking comes into play here. How can you, if necessary, change from your current way of working to something more strategic? Take a moment to think about this. Welcome back. Hopefully our next speaker, Gemma Ma from Australia, can help you capture the impact of the work you're doing, and she is going to get you all excited about collecting and analysing data.
I'm Gemma. I'm going to talk to you today about how you can use data to get the most out of your cat program. Do you ever feel like this? Another litter of kittens, another pregnant mum, another unsocialised Tom. If you want to make real changes for cats in your community for the long term, data can help you get there. And it might not be cute and fluffy, it might not be your idea of a really fun time, but it can be really game changing. Why do I need to collect data, I hear you ask? Can't I just focus on what I'm good at, saving the cats? Data actually has many different uses. It can help you plan, it can help you check that what you're doing is working, and it can help you continuously improve. Where data is especially useful is in communicating your impact and advocating for resources. Data, after all, is the love language of governments. If you want governments or other potential funders to take notice of what you're doing, you need to speak their language, and that language is data. Okay, great. Hopefully I have convinced you that data is worth your while. What next? We need to start with a really nice, clear goal. Being clear about our goal helps us decide what data we need to collect. Now, you might be pretty clear in your mind about what your goal is. It might be really obvious. You want to reduce the unowned cat population, or you want to improve free-roaming cat welfare. But keep in mind that different stakeholders can have different goals. You want to make sure you can speak the same language as the people who might be able to fund your programs, or the people whose help you might need. What are their goals? So not all data is created equal. You might be thinking, I already collect data. I can tell you exactly how many cats we've neutered and exactly how many we've rehomed. But we need to think beyond these output measures to measuring our impacts. I like these two memes that show the difference. So the archer on the left says, I hit my target of 50 arrows a minute. The archer on the right says, I hit an actual business goal. In this instance, the output is the number of arrows. The impact is hitting the target. So which archer did better? And if you're only measuring the number of arrows shot, how would you know which archer did better? And then on the right, the surgeon says, brilliant surgery, well done, shame the patient died. So in this instance, the output is the surgery, the impact is the outcome for the patient. So what we need to find are the indicators of impact. This is one definition of an indicator. It's a measurable variable or metric used to assess the effectiveness of an organisation's activities in achieving their intended impact. And I'll give you a very silly cat-related example. Let's pretend a thermometer costs $1 million and we can't afford one. And our goal of our program is to maintain a comfortable temperature for our cats. Well, we could use our cat's posture as an indicator. If our cat is roughly spherical, it's too cold. If they're melting into the floor, it's too hot. So note, this indicator doesn't perfectly or directly measure temperature. Sometimes it can be impossible or cost prohibitive to directly measure an impact. The indicator just gives you a clue that you're on the right direction, but most importantly, it's something that you can measure. So how do we pick indicators? First, let's turn our goals into questions. Then we're going to use data to answer those questions. Being clear about what questions you want to answer helps you decide what data you need to collect. So the questions are your impacts, and you will answer them using indicators. For example, let's have a look at the top line in this table. We can answer the question, is the unowned cat population decreasing? By tracking the number of cats seen on transect walks, or by tracking the number of cats in managed colonies. Note that some methods of measurement, so in this instance transect counts and colony tracking in particular, can help us answer several different questions. And luckily, Elly will teach us more about those later. I'm not going to go through this whole table. You might want to take a screenshot. And this is not by any means an exhaustive list. You might be able to think of other questions and other indicators that are more relevant to your situation. Again, you want to consider who is your audience, which indicators are going to speak to them. Also consider which indicators are already routinely measured, and are these indicators that you can access. How reliable is the source? And are there any additional data that you might want to start collecting yourselves? Okay, so that's all well and good. But what does that actually look like? You might be wondering, where do we start? First, I'd say don't feel overwhelmed. Start simple. If you're not already, maybe start recording some data in a spreadsheet. Call it monitoring data. Keep it as a living document and add to it as you need to. Keep in mind that you don't always know what data you might need until you need it. So a good rule of thumb is that if you're in doubt about whether or not you should write something down, you should probably write it down. Here is an example of where you might start if you have some sort of program working with unowned cats. So the first type of data is to record any information you have about your target population. When working with unowned cats, this often means colony tracking. This information is gold when it comes to communicating impact. It's also incredibly helpful operationally to help you target and monitor your neutering efforts. There are a lot of different ways that you can do this. You don't need to overthink it. Start by recording what you already know. Here's an example of how one group tracked their colonies. So they plot the feeding stations on a map. They give them all a unique name. Then just in a Word document, they track for each colony. Number 1, who are the caregivers? Number 2, which cats are currently present? Number 3, who has or hasn't been neutered? You could add a whole bunch more data to this as well, but that's a really good place to start. A little aside here that cameras, and especially Wi-Fi connected cameras that give you information in real time, can be a hugely helpful colony tracking tool when they're set up at feeding stations. So they can give you excellent and high resolution data about your cat population, but they're also really helpful operationally to save you time, to save you labour, keep your volunteers engaged, and also improve cat welfare too. Which leads us on to our second type of data, our outputs. Now, I know I said we want to focus on impacts, but we still need to record our outputs, and many of you will be recording these already. Again, we can keep this very simple. So each row is a cat, and the columns are fields that we can add as we need them. Some of these fields can be turned into indicators of impact. For example, the number of cats seen for whom veterinary treatment is required might be an indicator of cat health and welfare in the community that you might want to track over time. So if we notice that this Excel workbook has 2 sheets. This is the output sheet, and now let's take a look at this impact sheet. Recording your impacts can actually be very simple. For example, you might only have 1 measurement per indicator per year. In this instance, I've listed 6 indicators that correspond to 3 different impacts. You could add a transect count into this. You could add your colony tracking. As I've mentioned, you could also add the percentage of cats that you saw in the year who needed vet treatment. I've also demonstrated here 2 different ways you can communicate this data. In this instance, a graph is a really great way to demonstrate progress towards reducing cat overpopulation. See, these graphs show lovely trends over time. But we've only got 3 data points for nuisance complaints, which is not enough to demonstrate a trend. So instead, we can compare our nuisance complaints before the program started to our nuisance complaints after, and demonstrate and show that nuisance complaints have decreased by 49% compared to the 2 years before we started the program. So this is our 4th type of data. Type number 4 are your stories. Data isn't only numbers. The stories, or the qualitative data, can often be the most powerful and the most compelling when you're communicating what you're doing. It helps you understand context, it helps the numbers make sense, and it's really great for sharing your successes. So collect testimonials and quotes from cat caregivers or neighbours you've helped, collect photos, record the stories of individual cats who exemplify an issue, or of colonies you've worked with that demonstrate the impacts that you're aiming for. Here's an example. This is Shirley, a participant from our Parramatta Unowned Cat program. Shirley lives in government housing. She's on a disability pension and she doesn't drive. She also has an 11-year-old pet cat. Princess is 11, she's been neutered, she's registered with the council, and she lives purely indoors. Now, 6 months ago, Shirley had these 2 turn up on her doorstep when they were just tiny. Presumably they came from a large colony that we know is just 1 street over. Now, Shirley called the council, she called RSPCA to report the kittens and asked for help. But she was told, just stop feeding them. Now, Shirley couldn't just stop feeding them. They had nowhere to go and they were starving. Luckily, through our RSPCA program, we were able to offer Shirley free desexing for sugar and spice, and she was able to keep them. Now, just think, what would have happened if we weren't able to neuter sugar and spice before the breeding season? How many cats would Shirley be caring for now? Now, not everyone involved with unowned cats needs to be a data whiz. If you don't have these skills, find yourself people who do. Collaborating with other stakeholders to access their routinely collected data can also be very helpful. For example, ask the local council if they collect data on cat-related nuisance complaints. Ask your local shelter and rescue groups for their intake data. Even work with local universities. Tracking the impact of unowned cat programs can be a great student research project, for example. And then they can do it all for you. So yes, collaboration will help you track your impact, but it will also strengthen your program in all of the other ways. Now, just a note to say that data quality is really important. Not all data is equal. And sometimes the data that you're getting won't be telling you what you think it's telling you. For example, shelter intake can be a really great and accessible indicator of the size of the cat population and the level of overpopulation, but it's also affected by the shelter's intake policy and might be affected by cat disease outbreaks or COVID or staffing challenges. Another example might be nuisance complaints. Again, can be very accessible data, and it can be a great indicator for community nuisance issues, which can be something that, for example, councils can be very interested in. But it's another one that can be strongly affected by other factors, like, for example, how the council responds to nuisance complaints. Which is why it's really important to look at data critically, understand the context. Ideally, you'll monitor more than one metric, and wherever possible, monitor data from more than one source so you can get a really full picture of what's going on. And if the data is going in weird directions that you don't expect, you can figure out why that's happening. A good example of this happened to us in Kyogle. We had been running a cat desexing program for over a year and thought the program was going great. We've been working really well with local stakeholders. Volunteers were helping to trap and transport unsocialised cats. We got a handful of big colony carers on side and were desexing many cats through the local vets. But when we looked at the council cat-related nuisance complaints, we saw they'd increased by 300% since we'd started the program. Bad news, right? By digging a little deeper, we're able to discover that this increase was a combination of, one, the council had employed a new full-time ranger, and two, word had got around that the new council ranger was helping with the RSPCA cat program. So actually, the increase in calls about cats reflect an increased accessibility of services. It's a pretty good thing. And an increase in awareness of our cat program. So maybe not such bad news after all. So some takeaways from today. It doesn't have to be perfect. Start simple. Be guided by your goals in the first instance. Make sure your goals are really clear. Track indicators to measure impacts. Collaborate with other stakeholders who can help you get the data that you need. And collect stories to help the numbers make sense. Thank you, and happy measuring.
How is that for you? Do you feel the game-changing nature of data? I hope for those of you who haven't really considered data before that this may have changed your mind. There's a lot of information here and in all the other presentations in iCatConnect, so don't forget you can watch them again later and also look at a wealth of resources that complement the content on each topic. I'll tell you more later about how you can access this. So, how can you demonstrate the impact of your work on the entire cat population to the people who've given you funds, the grant providers, the donors, and your government? Wouldn't it be great to be able to tell them that you've had a significant impact by collecting data on the relevant indicators? Take a moment to reflect on how you use data. What might you start doing as a result of listening to Gemma? Welcome back. On the theme of data, part of the baseline activities when you start a cat population management program is the counting and surveying of cats and selecting your target population. Here's Elly Hiby, based in the UK, to tell you how that's done.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Elly Hiby and I'm here to get you excited about counting cats. Now, counting sheep might send you to sleep, but I believe counting cats will rouse you back up. I want to talk to you about how we can make it easy and yet also meaningful. Gemma has just told you all about how data can provide us with real insight into our work with cats. Now I'm going to dive into just one part of that and explore the practicalities of cat counts. Just to remind you of a key term that Gemma has already mentioned, indicators. We eat yellow bananas, not because we like eating yellow things, It's because the colour of the banana, its yellowness, and even those hints of brown tell us that the banana is ripe. The ripeness is what we really care about. When it comes to cats and our work managing their populations, we want to know whether our intervention is working. Are there fewer cats, and specifically fewer unowned cats? And we are often particularly concerned about unowned kittens because we know that their mortality is so high. And so we pick indicators that reflect the impacts that we really care about. And we track these indicators over time. And we pick indicators that are visible to us, ideally easily visible, like the colour of a banana, so that we can get our monitoring done as efficiently as possible. And that's our final part, the monitoring method that we will use to measure our indicators. And I'm going to focus on 2 of those today because I think they are the most accessible methods that we have. But I'm going to start by first addressing something that I feel can sometimes be a barrier, our desire for the magic number, the total number of cats in our community. And I totally understand that this would be an ideal number to have. And I'm even going to talk later about an option for calculating this number with caveats. But I also want to propose that it's not an essential. We can actually go a surprisingly long way without it. Consider this. Are there plenty more fish in the sea? If you work in the fisheries industry, the literal meaning of this question is really important. But fish are hard to count because they're under the sea. And so the most basic indicator used by the fishing industry is the number of fish they catch using a consistent amount of catching effort. And this is a free-roaming cat doing exactly what cats do very well, hiding, like a fish under the sea. So when we set out to survey cats, we know that we miss a lot of them. We just don't see them. During our recent ICAM conference, we heard Tamara Cartel from Four Paws report that they estimated they were seeing 13% of the cats during their surveys of cats in Sofia, Bulgaria. So for every cat they saw on their survey, they estimated there were a further 7 free-roaming cats that they didn't see. So what do we do about that? Well, we could start using methods like individual recognition and mark site analysis or distance sampling to try to calculate how many we miss. Or we could act like a fisherman and just count our catch. And this is what our catch can look like. It's a transect or a route. You travel along this route and catch, just visibly, not physically, every cat that you pass. Now, full disclosure, the data that I'm showing here is real, but it's actually from a dog project. This is Help in Suffering in Jaipur, India. But I love this example, so I hope you will forgive the species slip. HIS use 6 routes, which they walk every 6 or 12 months on 6 consecutive mornings. And what you see on the graph is simply the total number of dogs seen on all those 6 routes. And you can see the clear decline in that number over time. And although I don't have the data to show you here, they have continued this counting since 1997. So now approaching 30 years. There is no complex analysis here, just the number of dogs counted on each survey event. What makes this so powerful is their dedication to long-term data collection and the consistency. Same routes, same time of day, same survey protocol, year after year. Let's dwell on that consistency point for a moment. We need to standardise our method. Same route, same time of day, same mode of transport. Don't go from walking on foot to driving in a car. Find the way that works best for you and stick to it. Use the same survey effort. Are you looking under every parked car that you pass? Down every side street? There isn't a strict rule on what you should do, but it must be consistent over time. If you can, use the same observers or at least do a handover training to ensure that consistency is maintained between observers. Avoid poor weather and holidays when people will change their behaviour and the cats will change their roaming behaviour in response. These are all what are called confounding variables. They muddy the water. Remember our fisherman analogy? If they go and buy a bigger boat, bigger nets, fish for longer, then their catch reflects a change in their fishing capacity or effort, not the fish stocks. We want to be sure that the number of cats we count is only affected by the number of cats that exist in the wider free-roaming population. So if we see the number of cats we count decline by half over a period of years, we can be confident that this is because the wider free-roaming cat population has also declined by half. A few key questions that you might have about setting a survey up. Please keep in mind two factors: consistency and repeatability. It's almost useless if you do the survey just once. You need to be able to repeat it every few months, year after year, like the dog survey in Jaipur. So when it comes to where, create routes or paths that cover your project area. And because we are using this track to change an indicator over time, these routes don't necessarily need to be random or representative of all area types. You can design them to cut through hotspots where you know your unowned cats tend to live, creating routes that have the best chance of seeing the most unowned cats in the time you have available to survey. And talking of time, please don't make these routes too long. More than 1 hour may lead to mistakes as you become fatigued. And it's better to have a few shorter routes than one long, arduous one. The next question is what to record for each cat that we see. You'll need to record the location of the cat, and if you're using an app to record your data, like iCam's Talea app, the location is recorded automatically. But I would also record whether this is a sterilised or intact cat. So I'm assuming here you are marking cats as sterilised using ear tipping. And I would record their age at its most basic level. Is this an adult or a kitten? Consider using your age for sterilisation here as your threshold for when a cat becomes defined as no longer a kitten and into adulthood. For both these, also ensure you have an unknown category, no guessing. Having seen a cat is still useful information on its own, even if you don't know its age or sterilisation status. You may want to extend this to include some welfare scores and maybe whether the cat is wearing a collar. But this isn't essential, and remember we are looking for consistency when repeating this survey over time. So the more you add, the more training is required to ensure all observers score in the same way. The last question I'll address today about running surveys is how to record this data and keep track of it over time. You absolutely can go out with a clipboard and paper and then transcribe this into Excel at the end of each survey, but paper gets spoiled or lost, and I know people who have lost their data because it wasn't backed up and the files were corrupted. I instead encourage you to try using iCam's Talea phone app. It's free to use, comes with a video user guide, and takes a lot of the pain out of navigating along your routes because it includes a map. It's easy to record all the cats you see, including their GPS location, and data storage is done for you. And then you can view or download your data afterwards. I don't have time today to explain how to get started, but please take a look at this webinar on our iCam website to learn more. So what our transect counts can provide are indicators like this: total cats counted, the percentage sterilised and the percentage of kittens, both which tell us about the number of kittens at risk, but also an indicator of the breeding activity of free-roaming cats. You can combine the data from all routes to present how your whole population is responding to your efforts, but you can also look at individual routes and compare them. See if you can draw some insights as to why some are performing better than others. There can be a wealth of learning here. The next method is something that Gemma mentioned, tracking colonies. Many of us working with Cat TNR have contact with colony carers or feeders. These are key stakeholders in TNR, with the potential to support trapping efforts, but they're also the eyes and ears on the ground, and so have precious information that we can use for monitoring. What Gemma shared here from Australia is quite a sophisticated system, effectively a census of all cats in each colony, including names, photos, and basic information on sex, age, and sterilisation status for each cat, which is great. But even basic systems can be really valuable. Consider setting up a regular contact with key people attached to each colony. This could be via a WhatsApp group or ringing them over the phone, email, or face-to-face if the opportunity to do so. Establish key information you want to track over time. Think about your impacts and what indicators reflect those and are accessible to measure. When it comes to colonies, what does success look like to you? There might be fewer colonies in total, each colony smaller in size, with fewer kittens and more adults. You might also want a measure of stability, so more residents that have been there for at least a few months versus newcomers that have appeared recently, and fewer cats that are leaving because they've died. Key to this is keeping track of that data, making sure these regular updates are recorded with a clear date and colony location or name. Those rules of consistency and repeatability matter here too. Now, we can't control those feeders, so they will be a potential source of confounding variables, but we can do our best by not asking for too much detail, keeping in touch regularly, and taking time to bring them on board with this data collection mission. So, like with Transex, if we do our cat counting with help from our feeder friends, we can also track indicators like this over time. Total number of colonies, the number of cats per colony, what's the maximum size and also the average, the percentage that are sterilised, the percentage of kittens, and the percentage of newcomers versus residents. And again, like with Transex, we can look at all the data as a whole population, or we can compare between colonies, allowing us to identify which colonies are improving and potentially exploring what factors are driving their success. Perhaps greater TNR coverage. Our percentage sterilised would tell us that. Or perhaps greater owner engagement in the local community. And then we can use this learning to adapt and improve our work. Now, I know I started with a clear recommendation that you don't focus on population estimates, and I stand by that. Just a count can tell us so much. But I know that magic number is attractive, so I wanted to share one resource that might interest you. This is from an organisation called the Alliance for the Contraception of Cats and Dogs, a charity I am proud to be a trustee of. It's an online calculator that can help calculate an estimate if you are marking your cats as sterilised during a TNR programme. Let me show you how it works. The scenario is a large colony. Let's hark back to our fishing analogy and imagine them living at a fishing port. Over the last year, we have trapped, neutered, and returned 50 cats, and we enter that here. Note that the number changes to 45. That's because we know not all of them will have survived, so the calculator applies 10% annual mortality. What this calculator really needs to know is how many ear-tip cats do we believe are alive and living in this port at the time of our survey. In this case, we are estimating we have 45 ear-tip cats alive and roaming in this area. Then let's assume we do a survey. We follow a transect that traverses across the port, and on this survey we see 16 cats with ear tips and 9 without ear tips, and so we enter that data here. Then we click enter, and here are our results. There are an estimated 25 cats left to sterilise from a total population of 70 cats, and our TNR coverage is 64%. Well done us. But note that the calculator actually advises us to aim for 75% and tells us that we need to sterilise another 8 cats to reach that. Now, these estimates come with a health warning. This analysis depends on a number of assumptions that may not hold true, but it's quick and easy to use, and the results will be close enough to the real number to at least be useful input for our planning. So, in summary, counting cats should be fun. Well, at least I enjoy it. But it can also be easy, providing indicators that reflect whether we are achieving those impacts that matter to us and the cats. I covered 2 methods here for counting cats, using TransX and tracking colonies with the help of feeders. I encourage you to consider estimates as non-essential. Just use those counts. If you can keep consistent in your methods, changes in those simple counts and percentages can tell you a lot. They don't have to take many hours, and you don't need a PhD to understand the data. We can all look at a graph and see the trends over time. Finally, there are some great resources out there. Counting Cats by ACC&D is a great step up in detail from what I covered today. And if you really want to get into the nuances of counting cats, then the DC Cat Count Toolkit is a wealth of knowledge. And finally, I hope you feel inspired to get out and count some cats. Take a look at Talea. It will make your surveying easier. Bye for now, and I wish you the very best in your work with cats.
Elly has managed to make this sound much more achievable by showing we need to count the cats we see and not those under the sea. We have some great resources for you available to our members from the Alliance of Contraception for Cats and Dogs and the DC Cat Count that you can spend time reading to really digest what these upfront activities look like and how you might incorporate them into your next cat population management programme. We also have a link to tell you more about Talea, so don't forget to sign up for free membership to the iCatCare unowned cat community today. You may not be actively involved in this kind of work that requires counting and surveying, but we're all part of this big jigsaw puzzle. We're all interconnected. We're all part of this collaboration towards the goal of better cat welfare. If this information is relevant to the work you do, have a moment to reflect on what you plan to do after hearing Elly's presentation on surveying your cat population. Will you be doing anything differently? We're at that time again when you can reflect for a little longer or get a drink, as we're going to have a 10-minute break. See you shortly. Welcome back. You may be struggling to see how all this impacts on your day-to-day TNR work. How can you relate this to what you're doing? With that in mind, here is Sofia Rois from Portugal talking to you about a TNR project her team has undertaken.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity of showing a population management case study resulting from a strict collaboration between Animais de Rua and Change for Animals Foundation. Briefly introducing Animais de Rua. Animais de Rua is a Portuguese animal welfare organization focused on improving the lives of stray animals, particularly through the implementation of TNR programs, Trap, Neuter, and Return. And we collaborate closely with the municipalities across the country, across Portugal, as part of our effort to control the birth rate of stray cats. The project was conducted in the Ancão Peninsula, which is a natural peninsula in Faro district in the south coast of Portugal, as you can see here in the map. And on the north coast of the peninsula is a freshwater lagoon, and to the south is the Atlantic coast. There are approximately 500 individual properties within the peninsula, along with a campsite. So due to the geography of the peninsula, the animal population is almost completely contained with no migration, which is essential for which was essential for this program. So the only movement of animals was via human involvement, so being transported on or off of the peninsula. So this project was divided into 3 stages: research and TNR intervention from 2013 to 2016, and monitoring and evaluation from 2014 to 2016, with the aims of submitting all stray animals to the TNR program, collect as many data as possible, and show the program results into the community, not only into the local community, but also into the scientific community. Census of the animals was conducted to gather information about the size, welfare, and dynamics of the local cat and dog population. And a community survey was also conducted to understand the attitudes and behaviors of the local community. And here we included both pet owners and non-pet owners. We used the Mission Rabies mobile application at first. Of course, we adapt and refine the mobile application for the survey. So we create separate versions for cats and dogs, and of course provided training for volunteers undertaking the surveys. 3 teams of volunteers conducted population census across the place. Each team conducted and repeated their census within their area, each time retracing the same route, of course. And one volunteer recorded sightings of dogs while the other recorded sightings of cats. So what kind of information did we record? We recorded GPS location of the animal, dogs and cats dynamics, such as neutered or unneutered males and females, unknown, lactating females, litters, body condition score 1 to 5 in dogs and 1 to 3 in cats, signs of sickness, injury, signs of ownership, and if an animal was seen within property boundaries. Teams of volunteers interviewed around 25% of the local community over a 2-week period, and that was repeated semi-annually from 2013 to 2016 in order to determine attitudes to animals, so ownership behavior, state of knowledge regarding basic cat and dog care, determine perception of stray animals, and assess tolerance for animals on the street. Regarding results, the resulting estimated population figured based on the survey was around 220 cats and 150 dogs. And this result is interesting because the national report we got when asking how many animals there were on the peninsula suggested 200 to 600 cats and 40 to 50 dogs. So the data show that there are far more dogs than anticipated, but also fewer cats. In the cat population, the results showed that 48% were male and 52% were female. And in the dog population, 78% were male and 25% were female. Body condition score showed that 89% of dogs had a body condition of 3, so healthy body condition. And with cats, this figure was 91%. So only 5% of both cats and dogs were recorded as showing signs of sickness. So regarding community survey, results shows that of the 150 people interviewed, 60% own at least one animal, so one or more animals, and 40% did not own an animal at all. People owning dogs are 75% males and 25% females, whereas people owning cats are 40% males and 60% females. 47% of people that own animals said that they allow their animals to roam, but only 90% of them of owned animals were sterilized. So this is the major problem. When asked whether stray animals cause a problem, 65% of the people who did not own an animal said yes. So not owning an animal, but saying that stray animals were a problem. And interestingly, only 45% of people who did own animals thought that stray animals were a problem. So you can see in detail all of these results in a very recent published paper regarding all the study we did at Praia de Faro. Continuing monitoring was essential to ensure animals not reached during the initial TNR campaign still had access to sterilization, so vaccination, sterilization, and treatment. And thanks to that monitoring period, we were able to neuter 98% of the feline population 161 cats during the implementation period and 62 cats during the monitoring periods. So 223 cats were neutered. Regarding dogs, 69% of the canine population were sterilized, 98 dogs during the implementation period, and 12 during the monitoring, resulting in 110 dogs, neutered dogs. During this process, we were able to give for adoption 18 animals from the peninsula as well. So this project also resulted in more than 11 publications, resulting in the first identification, for example, of an ocular parasite in cats in Portugal. Also, during the population census, we felt that there was a great deal of community support and that the project was seen very positively, and the animal population estimated appeared to be fairly conclusive, and this allows for accurate planning of other projects, as well as providing a solid baseline on which to conduct further surveys. This project was also very important in disseminating of resources and materials to promote welfare and responsible ownership to support changes in attitudes and behaviors. And just let me mention that in 2022, when we did the last monitoring survey, only 50 neutered cats were observed in the peninsula, which means that GNR works. To finish, just let me thank to all the partners involved in this project. I'm pretty sure that without them, we wouldn't be able to put this into practice. So thank you so much for listening. Feel free to reach me in order to know more about this project or to know more about Animais de Rua. Thank you so much.
Sofia has shown us an example of what can be done when everything is planned from the outset. It's always good to hear about theory being put into practice and what it looks like. It would be great if in years to come you could be presenting at a future Unknown Cat event like this, telling everyone about your strategically planned cat population management programme. Sofia has kindly agreed to make Animais de Rua's TNR manual available in English and Portuguese to our Unknown Cat community members for you to download and keep as a source of information. So don't forget to sign up for membership today. Before we move on, take a moment to reflect on this presentation. Did you learn something new? Do you plan to try something different or take some action to enhance your TNR process? Welcome back. One important part of any TNR project involves making decisions. There are countless ones, both large and small, that need to be made on a daily basis. How do you navigate these decisions and be confident enough to make them? This is the first of 2 panel discussions in this event. I'm going to be joined by Adele Goodman, Natalie Dalgray, Kim Horsford and Harry Eckman, all of whom have worked in the field in TNR programs for many years, to talk about those decisions and what we need to consider. Welcome everyone to this panel discussion on TNR decision making. I'm joined by Adele Goodman, Natalie Dowgray, Kim Horsford and Harry Eckman. Welcome to you too, and thank you for joining me. So let's get started. Kim, may I start with you? We just heard a really great presentation from Sofia on the practicalities of a good TNR program. And with any TNR program, there are numerous important decisions that need to be made, often very quickly. Now, you were involved in a big and very successful TNR program in Bermuda some years ago now. What kind of decisions needed to be made quickly about the cats you were working with during that program? And yeah.
Well, it's the very typical sort of trapping scenario. You have a cat in a trap and you need to decide what to do with it. And when I was working with cats, I would always have like a tick list that I'd give to the vet to say, these are the things that need to be done with this cat. So neuter, test, treat, whatever, maybe pregnant, maybe whatever. So I think those are the kind of quick decisions you make, and having a formula that you tick up against is quite helpful. But sometimes you need to make even faster decisions. Sometimes it's, do I need to rush this cat to a vet and have it, put to sleep or urgently treated or whatever? Then there are quick decisions like, is this a pet cat? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What do I do? Do I take it away? Do I let it go? In Bermuda, it was common for TNR cats to be tattooed, so you couldn't always tell very easily whether or not they'd been neutered. So sometimes you were making those quick decisions. And sometimes even, it's a pet cat. Shall I ask the owner if they'd like it neutered?
Yeah. Okay.
So it's that sorts of things that you're making a decision about.
That's a lot to do in a very quick, urgent situation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Adele, you've assisted in TNR programs all over the world. Is your experience similar to that, or were you making other decisions as well?
So a lot of the projects that I worked with are Global South, so the decisions are generally evaluated against resources. I find that when I am out in the field, colonies in front of me, I've identified and prioritized cats, I find myself thinking of all of the possible outcomes, like 15 steps ahead for that individual cat within about 5 seconds, trying to really think ahead and make a smart decision. And that could be as basic as, should I trap this cat right now? Is this the right time? Can I actually help them? If they are sick, it could be something that's really simple, like rotten teeth, can easily do that. But what if they're suffering with something like cancer? If they are, can I take them in? Can I help them? Do we have the capacity for that? Will we have a home for them after? Or will it potentially be a case of take them in and have to discuss euthanasia quite quickly? Or can we simply not help them because the vets will not have the diagnostic capacity, and so it won't be a decision about recovery. It'll be more a decision about like either homing or euthanasia. If this cat is pregnant, what happens if they give birth on the operating table? Do we continue? Do we have homes for the cats? Do we have the ability to recover them with mum for 2 months? Are our vets already overstretched? Have I trapped too many cats today? I find that a lot of the decisions we have to make are really, really basic in a very short period of time because of the restrictions of capacity and access to resources.
Of course. Natalie, equally as a vet working in the welfare sector, you've assisted in many TNR programs. Do you have any further thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think both Kim and Adele have raised some really good points around that often diversity and the resources and that capacity piece. And from the vet side of things, depending on where you're working, depending on the group that you're working with, the middle part, the veterinary part, may be slightly different, and each group may have within those big buckets, maybe slightly different priorities. Obviously, the neutering tends to be the key priority, but in terms of things like vaccination, disease testing, even things about, as Kim alluded to earlier around the tattooing, is that the process of marking for neutering? Are we using an ear tip? Are we using an ear notch? And as the vet, you need to know what the decision is for that particular group that you're working with at the time, whether you're volunteering for a week or 2 weeks with a particular project, or whether you're working as the local vet in that area and you're seeing these sort of TNR type cases alongside your normal first opinion work, which perhaps is even more complex because you may be going down very different pathways with these different groups of animals. So it's important to get those really big buckets agreed up front before, the cat even appears in a trap. Because occasionally you might accidentally trap a cat, but most of the time there is a little bit of a concerted effort involved in it. So, there can be a little bit of pre-warning, pre-planning with your veterinary group that you're working with. Mm-hmm. The probably more fast reactive stuff is really a lot of these more individual decisions around health conditions, what's appropriate treatment, euthanasia decision-making processes, what is the group you're working with, feelings around that. And then there are even more emotive issues. Euthanasia is a very emotive issue, but things like pregnant spays, late pregnant spays, what is the veterinary team happy with? What is the group that you're working with happy with? So a lot of this stuff, if you can discuss it and at least have some top level agreement before these types of cases present, I think that's really, really helpful.
That's really interesting. Harry, you not only work in the field, but also in strategic planning of cat population management. Is your experience the same?
Completely. I mean, everything that Adele and Kim and Natalie have just said is absolutely true. And the thing with TNR is it's all this decision making is so layered and so based on the moment. And so, as Nat said, obviously having some big buckets that, if this happens, then that takes away some of that. But there's always going to be these moment to moment decisions. But when you're thinking strategically and actually planning one of these projects, there's almost a step before, which is the mindset or the environment that you're going into this TNR program with, because you could be an individual trapper who is just on this particular day because you have one vet space or one trap or a half an hour to trap a cat, you're going in to do a cat, or you're doing a mass, trap everything that you can find, or you are thinking much more systematically and going colony by colony. And when you're in that situation, that decision of which cat do I, if it's a manual trap, which one do I pull the string on, is another layer to that, because are you just getting any cat that you can get because you have a vet space and that's it? Or are you thinking about, well, if this is colony management, then obviously I want to be thinking about maybe waiting for the nervous cats and spending a little bit more time and thinking about the dynamics within that particular colony. And so those decision-making processes come into play as well. And they're hugely important because then they're going to impact the next cat that you trap and then the next cat that you trap. And so, yeah, it's this multi-layered constant juggling in your head of, is it now? Is it this cat? Is it later? It's complicated.
It is complicated. My goodness, just listening to this, there are big strategic decisions before you even start your program. And then there's all these micro decisions based on a particular animal in that moment. And I'm sure from what you're saying, because you also experienced, that these decisions seem to be made so really quickly. You don't think about them, you make them, but actually you've probably got that process in your head that you just go through very quickly. So Adele, is there a process or a method that you think you use when you're making these decisions about individual cats?
I find that previous experience, both good and bad, massively influences that. I do think acting purely in the moment can lead to bad decisions in the long term, or emotive decisions rather than logical decisions. So what I would say, kind of building on what Harry has said, I would say the people in the field either need to be very confident in that decision making themselves and know they have the autonomy to make those decisions, or have a very clear idea of how to make those decisions instructed from previously decided protocols, but also who to ask when unsure. Because yes, we are in the field, we are doing manual physical work, but we also need to have like quite a clear bird's eye view of what the next 15 steps for that individual looks like, how it's going to impact the funds that are spent, how it's going to impact the organizations, how it's going to impact the community, the vets, the stakeholders, the funders. There are so many things that go into those physical decision moments, like Harry said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that was said recently by a friend from who was working on a TNR project in the Humane Society in Arizona was that field staff often are acting as first responders, social workers, community liaisons, and sometimes also a bit of a vet assistant, and often with a little training and limited resources. So I think having those protocols and policies in place beforehand and having some of that decision making, what that decision making looks like, discussed about beforehand and agreed beforehand, can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And, it strikes me that, in this group here now, you've got the experience, you can handle all those decisions, but to expect somebody who's volunteering with you to, for the trapping process and what have you, to make those decisions, it's too much. It's just too much. So Kim, how do you manage that? I mean, do you train them, or do you just give them a sort of chain of command, say, now speak to this person about that or whatever? How do you manage it?
Well, I think the key thing is that it's a people business. Although it's all about cats, it's really about people. And you have to build these really strong relationships with your volunteers, with your communities, and with the people who are taking care of the cats, especially. So it's about building a sort of relationship of trust and having these common values, which in my mind is always cat-centric. It's a cat-friendly approach. It's what is best for the cat. So then getting people to think like that. So it is the policies, it is the process, it is the chain of command. They're all really important, but also you're trying to get people's sort of to emotionally engage with that way of working. They're thinking, what is best for this cat? Rather than, if it was my pet cat, this is what I would do. But this is not your pet cat. This is a cat in a very different situation. And so thinking about how is the best way to handle the issues this cat is facing, and what is the best outcome for this cat, which may not be sitting on somebody's lap. And a lot of volunteers, I think, go through that process of changing their view of what is good for cats. And that's all part of it.
Yeah. That's a really hard lesson to learn, because many people would volunteer for something like that because of the fact that they love cats and they love the cats they're familiar with, which are pet cats. So, Harry, have you experienced this? Do you, is there a is there a process that people have to go through in order to adjust to that way of thinking? It sounds painful.
It is. I mean, Kim raises such an important point there, which is the mindset of kind of going in there to one of these programs. And obviously, when we're talking about examples here, we're kind of alluding to organized programs where there's a structure in place. But in the real world, it's, the majority of people that are going to be doing TNR are, one or two people or a handful of friends with a couple of traps. That's not going to be as organized or as structured as we're talking about here. And the reason that they started doing it is because, in their neighborhood, there's a few cats. They've gone online, they've Googled, what do you do with stray cats? They've bought a trap or made a makeshift one, and they're just kind of making it up as they go along. And even if they are getting good information, through International Cat Care or, whichever local group that's providing them with information, they really are just kind of like this learning process. And as Kim said, they're going into it with, I want to help these cats, because they're not seeing it as cat population management. They're seeing it as, these are the cats that I see every day and I walk past and I probably feed. And so what do I do with these cats? And so there's this emotional connection with the cats that you don't get when you're looking at a population level and just going from place to place for colony management. And so that's really, really tough. And I think that I think there's always going to be people that will not be able to make that leap between caring for the animals and wanting to help each individual cat and seeing it as a population management issue. And I think we have to be conscious of that going into these programs when we're talking about this, and understanding that not everybody's going to come on board with us. There's going to be people who are going to be continually conflicted and are going to want to, name every cat and potentially find a home for it, even if it's really not in the best interest of that cat at all. Because, oh, well, yeah, but you know what? I feed it every day, and so I've trapped it and I put it back. And when I give it food, I stroke it. So there's no reason to not try and find a home for it. And that's going to take away from, dealing with the population itself. And so we need to work out what the role of each one of these trappers and these stakeholders and these groups is in the bigger picture. And it might be that they are essentially just colony carers who are managing their own colony, and they aren't going to expand beyond that. They aren't going to be involved in wider cat population management because at some level they just don't want to. They don't want to take that leap, and that's fine. But we have to recognize that that's a truism.
That's a really, really good point. So, Natalie, I'm just wondering, if we know that these decisions have to be made, and we're thinking about the number of people who informally trap cats in the way that Harry's suggesting, is there still a responsibility for them to plan ahead with regard to decisions? What if they trap a very sick or injured cat? What if they trap a very heavily pregnant cat? Do they not still need to make these decisions?
Potentially, yes, and it's a really interesting one, I think, from a veterinary perspective to reflect on as well, because depending on your experience in the veterinary world, whether you've worked predominantly just in a private veterinary clinic where your population of cats that you deal with are owned pet cats, the way you manage those cases potentially is very different from some of these cats that fall more in the street cat spectrum. They're not comfortable around people. And some of those medical decisions aren't going to be appropriate for those cases because you haven't got the ability to manage them longer term. So there is definitely some need for at least a kind of agreement or a policy around some of those really sort of top line decision making from these groups, whether they just be managing one individual cat colony and it's one person. They need to build a good discussion based relationship with their veterinary team, and just between the two of them work out what is that standard of care that they're happy with. And some of that may vary from person to person, depending on the colony and depending on that person's relationship with the colony. Some of these cats may be very much down that far feral end of the spectrum and be completely unhandleable, but others, they may know the 10 cats in this colony on an individual basis, and they may have the ability to put medication in the food twice a day and make sure it gets to that individual cat. And so you can make slightly different decisions with maybe that group compared to the other one. So it is tricky. It's very complex.
It is. Honestly, there's a word that keeps coming up. It's complicated. It's incredible, really. So it sounds like if you're going to be a smaller, more informal TNR type process, then that relationship with your veterinary partner is absolutely pivotal, and you need to have those conversations. And I'm just wondering, Kim, from your experience, what happens if those decisions at that high level that Nat's been talking about are not made, or they're not well thought through? I mean, what are the consequences of that?
The main consequence is that cats suffer. In my experience, cats end up being treated and caged for weeks or months, having inappropriately been treated, and then the struggle to decide what to do with them. So what is the most common problem I feel is that people make the decision to treat, but they don't consider what the outcome is and what the final sort of situation is going to be for that cat. It's just the assumption, let's treat it, let's get it better. Oh dear, we have a cat that now is incapable of living independently in the colony because of its physical condition, but it's not suited to being in a home. Now what do we do with it? So it then faces even more months in a cage while someone tries to find an outcome. So I think the key thing I would say is always think about down the road where this cat is going, what's the future for it, then make a decision that's based on those facts, not just on your gut feel about treating it, because the main suffering is the cat. The other thing is that resources are used unnecessarily on treating cats, which should have been used to, say, neuter, and had a much bigger impact on the population. So, it's not just the cat you're treating that's suffering. It may be that you're depriving other cats of being looked after and stopped from reproducing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're saying resonates with what Adele was saying earlier about when you're trapping a cat, you have to think 15 steps ahead, because it could be to what end am I doing this? Is this cat going back? Is this cat going, what's the future for this cat? Because I am now intervening in this cat's life, and I've got to make sure it's going to be no worse off as a result of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, goodness. So here's a question for you, Adele. Are there any situations, because I know you've worked in very different environments and cultures, are there any situations that regularly cause conflict about these decisions?
Well, I would say that if there are not clear sort of procedures that everyone has agreed to follow, if decisions are made without taking into consideration the other people who they affect, that that can cause a lot of frustration. It can even cause resentment. If I'm in the field and I'm just deciding to take in all of these sick cats, and the person who's responsible for finding foster and recovery and potentially adoptive homes for them hasn't agreed and doesn't have the ability to help me with that at the moment for whatever reason, they haven't consented to that, and I've overloaded them without considering them. And that can also apply to vets. If we don't have agreed upon anesthesia, analgesia, decision making around euthanasia, what to do in complicated situations, like there's an emergency on the operating table, what to do with that. If we don't have agreed upon policies in place, the vet may make a decision that the rest of the group, the individuals or the organization don't agree with, and then feelings of resentment can grow. That can affect the relationship with the vet, which is really crucial for any kind of veterinary intervention, whether it's just a few people or on a larger scale. And obviously there are the effects on the cats. The cats suffer, just like was previously said, but there are also big consequences for the people involved. If we're taking on more than we can handle, or there's a lot of unpleasant effects that happen because of our decision making, whether that's the suffering to the cats or the team is getting burnt out because there's too much on their shoulders. They've bitten off more than they can chew. That is a recipe for disaster. And especially as Harry was talking about earlier, I think a significant portion of people who are intervening medically or with sterilization are small groups, individuals in communities, and a huge majority of the ones I've seen who have started while focusing on TNR are now mostly rescuing and are completely financially, physically, and emotionally overloaded. And that affects their ability to help the cats, that affects their ability to do this long term, it affects their well-being, and it's just not a sustainable solution.
No. And you know what? This really makes me think how important working together and collaboration is. From, it's sensible for resources, but also this is a job that's hugely emotionally and physically draining. Yeah. And surely it'd be so much better to work with others as a team and support each other as part of that. Harry, what's your experience of what regularly causes conflict within TNR decision making?
I think, I mean, obviously, Dale's point is spot on, and we've kind of talked before about that conflict of emotion versus pragmatism, and I think that's really key. And I think when you start approaching it in the way again that we talk about it from a population management level, if we were to look at cats as wildlife, which in many cases as feral cats or even roaming animals, they would be perceived as. If we were going and approaching that in that way, where we don't have that emotional connection to each individual animal, this would be a much easier issue to consider, because then there would be no question of, oh, well, here's this fox that I'm going to try and find a home for. That wouldn't even be a question if we were talking about, wildlife population management. But because there is this, the cat sitting in two different, situations within our perception. They are a roaming animal, they are feral, but also they could easily be sitting on our lap at home. And so there is this conflict. And I think that is very difficult. And I think it's one of the reasons why so many animal welfare groups end up splintering at some point. You'll have a small group of people who have all kind of decided, let's work together. We've read about doing a TNR program, and then one goes, no, I think I could home this cat. And the other ones go, no, that goes away. It takes away from resources, as Adele and Kim said, or no, it's not appropriate for this animal. It's like, no, I've had a cat like this before. And then people have a different approach, and you have a splintered group. And I see that happening so often. Because it comes down to, as we said, a decision about an individual animal that is based on an emotional connection to it, or it is similar to a cat that they've dealt with before. And yeah, it's something I don't see that changing, to be honest.
No, that's human nature,
Yeah.
I guess. So shall we end with a big one? What about kittens? This is such an emotive topic about what to do with kittens in a TNR program. So Natalie, what do you recommend regarding how to approach the kitten decision making in TNR programs?
It's an interesting one. I will probably give a very veterinary perspective on this around the neutering part. So there's definitely a piece just to start with about the time of year that you're doing your TNR program. So a lot of the ones I've been involved in, we've normally been out there in spring, in countries, especially when it does have a strong seasonal pattern. So part of the way we're addressing the kitten population program is getting the mum neutered, ideally before she's pregnant, but realistically, a lot of the time we are doing pregnant spays during this time, which when we talk about emotive issues, that's one that there really needs to be a very clear agreement and a policy on before you start. So sounds awful. If you can prevent the kitten problem before it begins, that would be an argument for potentially looking at the timing of year that you stage your intervention. The last one I was involved in, I think we neutered about 80 female cats in a week, and probably 60 to 70% of them were pregnant. If we'd been doing that at the end of summer and autumn, that probably would have been 160 cats that we would have needed to neuter. Most of them had sort of, it's usually between 4 and 6 fetuses, but we know most of those don't survive to adulthood, but you can still probably say on average one kitten per litter does make it through to a breeding age. So there's that piece. Also, you need to have that discussion of, have you got the resources and the facilities and the staff that's comfortable doing kitten neutering? And again, I would take the approach that if, as the vet, you're comfortable to do the anaesthetic and neuter the kitten, just treat them like you would a normal cat going through the TNR process, get them neutered, get them returned to site. There is that grey area with the youngsters, and often the ones that I've been involved in, they're not coming into the TNR process. If you've got good trappers and they're working well, maybe with the feeders of the colony, you can recognise which queens are lactating, get them in, get them neutered, get them straight back out to continue feeding their kittens, and then have a bit of a detective process, ideally, to try and identify where those kittens are and make sure you mop them up later on in the process. it's probably slightly out of my experience and remit to discuss the socialization process. So I will hand that over to you guys who are far more experienced in that. I'm stepping out of that difficult discussion.
Very sensible. Kim, thoughts?
Oh, yes. Well, kitten socialization, very, very topical, very much a split view on that. I think those who will take kittens of all sorts of sizes and ages and try to socialize them and make them into pets. I have had a very, very poor experience in Bermuda with trying to do that with volunteers bringing in kittens. And we ended up with probably about 70 young cats who were partially socialized, but not pet cats socialized. So it was a really, really difficult thing to sort of manage in the longer term, because these were cats that couldn't go back to where they'd come from because they'd been left there when they were young. And we had to kind of make homes, outside homes for them, with fairly sort of good cover care, not just feeding, but because they were kind of used to people. And in some ways it was worse because they'd lost their fear of people. So they were much more vulnerable, say, to people who would like to poison them or harm them, of which, a lot of that was going on. So in many ways, we did them a terrible disservice by trying to socialize with them. And I think for me, you have to be absolutely clear that these kittens, have a more than 90% chance of being socialized to pet quality animals, but also that you have pet homes for them. And I've been to shelters in other countries where I have seen stacks and stacks and stacks of kittens in crates waiting to be rehomed, and yet there aren't any homes for them. And they end up shipping them all over the world to people. And, those kittens have pretty awful lives in cages. They suffer from infectious disease because there's so many of them. And it would just have been so much better just to have neutered everything and left it where it was. And I always feel if you've got a kitten that turns out to be really friendly, you've neutered it, you put it back, you can then take it from the colony and home it if a home comes along. But that, I would say socialize with very, very great care, and only do it when you're absolutely sure you can do it and you've got somewhere for them to go.
Thank you, Kim. And on that note, I mean, we could talk about this because it's such a massive topic and so complicated, but I think the bottom line is this is a complicated process. And thank you very much for sharing your experience with me today. Some of the topics discussed here can be distressing. Many decisions that need to be made can be a life or death choice. Decisions in these circumstances need to be made quickly, but with full understanding of the situation, the options you have, the option you choose, and why you choose it. You also need to have a full understanding of the consequences of your decision. Now is a good time to think about the consequences for the cat population as a whole and for individuals of decisions you may have made in the past or will make in the future. This isn't about being right or wrong. It's about considering how you made or will make those decisions. Was there anything discussed by this panel that you found helpful? Take a moment to reflect. Welcome back. We're coming to the end of the first day of iCatConnect, and we hope you've enjoyed the session so far and have lots to reflect upon before we start again tomorrow. But first, I'm going to join our panelists, Harry Eckman, Sarah Ellis, Adele Goodman, Elly Hiby and Gemma Ma for our first live Q&A session. Lindsay Quinlan will be chairing this session, so if you've registered your question already in the chat, that's great. If not, please join us for the live stream and pop your questions in the live chat. We'll be answering as many of your questions as possible.